already live.
Oh, wow.
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Regional call. Okay. They used to have a bunch of Edward Jones fans here.
Yeah, they've all walked away somehow.
They're all obviously smart asses as well.
Hey, do we have to ethically disclose this gift? 85 cents. I'm trying to sway off that.
They all do. They all do.
Oh, I know.
I just have to use it. I have to use my outside source. Yeah, I turned on anyway.
Oh, good, yeah.
Right in front of you for high school.
You turn them.
Down.
That's handy. I like that.
Oh, the mic.
I'll figure it out. Yes.
You'd be surprised you're all.
I don't think these mics are working, but we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to call the, what's the date?
23rd.
January 23rd meeting of the Board of Education order, please. And now it's working. Can you hear me? At this point, we're here for a workshop to consider 3 different items which are listed on the agenda, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Lawrence at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate y'all coming out on a Saturday morning. We've got some good information that we'd like to share with you, but also we have the opportunity to receive training as the governing board of Aiken County Public Schools and as the grant holder for Head Start in Aiken and Barnwell counties. You require training on Head Start. So we're excited to have Shady Hall, who is our director of Head Start here in Aiken County, is going to lead us all through that. So this time I'll turn it over to Shady.
Okay, good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. So I'm going to be brief. Hopefully I'll try to keep this to an hour. Can you hear me? Okay. Try to keep it to an hour. It is required by the Office of Head Start that the board is trained. That's in the regulations, so that's why you're here. So, Jeannie, if you could click to the next slide. Thank you. We won't do welcome and introductions. I will say, though, that we have the Policy Council that is watching also. They've been invited to join us, but they're watching on the webcast. So the purpose of the training, we'll go over that. We'll look at the Head Start history as well as the philosophy. Then we'll talk about the foundations for Head Start in any Head Start centers, which is through the South Carolina Department of Social Services, Child Care Licensing Division. Then we'll have an overview of the Head Start Act and the Head Start Performance Standards. Now, when I say overview, because we could not tackle the Head Start Performance Standards and the Head Start Act all in this one day. It would take us probably a week or more to do that. So it's going to be an overview. And then we're going to address ERSI. And those acronyms stand for Eligibility, Recruitment, Selection, Enrollment, and Attendance. And that's also required. So why are you here? Because you must be here. Nobody probably going to get up this morning at 7:30, but we have to do it. So, our learning objectives. What are we going to learn? So the first objective is that as the Policy Council and governing body, you will understand the history of Head Start and the mission of Head Start and early Head Start. So now what I'm going to do now is say, anytime I say Head Start, we're talking about both Head Start and early, okay? So I won't have to continue to say Head Start, early Head Start. Learning objective number 2 is that the Policy Council and the governing body will understand the process for the development and the makeup of the Policy Council and the requirements for the board according to the Head Start Act and performance standards. Learning objective number 3 is that the members of the governing body and policy council will understand your role and responsibilities and what that entails with operating the Head Start grant. And then learning objective number 4 is that you will be knowledgeable of ERSI, of the eligibility requirements for Head Start. Okay. Now what we're going to do is show you a video, and it's about a 13-minute video. It does a better job than I could ever do on showing you the history of Head Start. So we'll have that now.
When I think about the history of Head Start, I really get very nostalgic because I remember the fervor that we felt that spring. We got word that this legislation had been passed. It was part of the war on poverty, and that we were going to have a role, we thought, in eradicating poverty. And we were going to start with very young children in a program called Head Start.
One foot right in front of the other.
The thing that I remember the most was about the wisdom that went into the planning of this program. And it all started with the convening of a group called the Cook Committee. And they had the wisdom to see that you needed a healthy child, to have a child that would be prepared to learn, that you had to involve the parents to really be supportive of that child's development and learning, and also that the parents in turn would learn from being part of such a comprehensive program.
Sadly, there are little children who are already headed for lives of frustration and misery. No one ever read them a story, taught them a nursery rhyme, showed them about colors, letters, and numbers. When they start school in the first grade, they'll be so far behind the others that they may never catch up. But there is hope. Write Project Head Start, Washington, D.C.
Many different kinds of pilot demonstration programs arose from the basic Head Start model. Not only the parent-child centers with 0-3 and Child and Family Resource Program, but there were a number of others.
Well, I think all Americans now know from research that the earliest you can start giving children rich experiences, the better their quality of learning is, the more they're prepared for a more structured setting in public school.
My fellow Americans.
I remember when Mr. Johnson started Head Start and when he signed the Head Start Act, and I remember working with Head Start on the Indian reservations in 64 and 65.
Head Start is such a wonderful program for all children in America, and in particular for Native children, because it gives them a chance to learn about their culture, their language, and it has a social service program that catches health issues very early, and that has been so significant for all children in America.
I went to a Papago reservation, and that was outside of Tucson. Here you see not just bilingual education, but trilingual. They were learning the Indian dialect, they were learning Spanish dialect, and then English. Exciting stuff, eating the Native American foods, good nutrition, the culture was pride.
In every instance that I talk to Indian people, I ask them, how did you become a teacher? What are some of the reasons that you were able to be an administrator or a nurse? Most of them said it's because of the Head Start parenting.
I was the migrant coordinator for several years, and then I became director for the Indian Migrant Programs Division in the late 70s through the early 80s. Most of our centers were open 10, 12, 14 hours based on the working hours of the farm workers. When the standards came in, we did develop a curriculum specifically designed for the mobile population.
One of the guiding principles when we started on it was these standards not only have to be realistic, but they have to be standards that could be implemented in Alaska. They had to be implemented in the mountains of Tennessee, in very rural areas, on reservations, and I always like to think of the one. They had to be
able to be implemented at the Head Start program in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Wherever you go, the cornerstones of Head Start, the program performance standards, the whole philosophy is portrayed in its own way across the country, and you can walk into any program and feel that familiarity and see the same kinds of goals and such being carried out. I was one of the very first employees of Head Start Bureau back in 1965, and at that time, toys for children in child development were just almost non-existent. So what we would do, we had a person on the staff that developed a book called Beautiful Junk. And it was what you could do with these little things that you have around the house. Pulls of thread, cartons for milk, cartons from eggs, and all the toys were really developed with very innovative ideas.
My mother, out of 7 children, decided to send me to Head Start. And something happened during that time that I was in Head Start. And I don't think I'll ever forget it. It's been with me all of my life. They took our class to a clinic, and they gave us all immunizations. And so at first I was kind of devastated because I'm like, what's going on? And that was my first time actually receiving the immunization. But my mom said from that point on that I was interested in health and medicine. And I would ask for doctor's bags or nurse's bags. And as I went on through school, I decided to go into the field of public health education. And it just stuck with me for a long time.
Head Start tried something different, and they said, look, we want parents to have some say in how the money is spent, how the program is developed, what is happening to the children, get them involved in activities. That was a major, major shift in any program the government had ever supported.
Creamy what? Creamy.
So many of our parents who started out as volunteers and who were even reticent to come to the classroom went on to get their GEDs and then went on to community college and were assistant teachers in the classroom.
I started Head Start in 1985 as a parent. My daughter is now 23 years old. She's a college graduate, and I'm so proud of what Head Start has done for her. And I'm now the Disability Services Manager with the San Francisco Head Start program.
They don't only just embrace the child, they embrace the mom, the dads, and the entire community. I have interviewed parents who told how they went from being a bus driver to a cook, from a cook to a teacher aide, from a teacher aide to a lead teacher, believe it or not, from a lead teacher to like a family service coordinator. And I had one experience where even the person had become Head Start director.
Shared decision-making, and then the whole formal structure of program governance is so absolutely unique to Head Start and is very powerful and empowering to individuals, but also to groups.
When they do transition to kindergarten,
it's the wisdom of the founders of Head Start to recognize that parents, along with the community, can work very well together and can make a really important difference in the lives of children, no matter who they are.
what you see happen to families, to young children, to communities, it is absolutely incredible.
I saw a black cat looking at me.
I don't know of any other program that works so well to impact and change people, change homes, change communities.
I started with Head Start in 1968. I joined what was called the CDTA division, that's Career Development Technical Assistance Division. And We were at that time responsible for all the training and technical assistance activities for Head Start. I think our program, working with the colleges and universities, helped them to begin to develop child development curricula. And I think that's one of the things that Head Start helped to influence throughout the nation.
In 1965, I was at the University of Iowa, and that was at the very beginning of Head Start, and there was only summer programs, so the university was asked to conduct in-service training for the teaching staff, and so my colleagues and I put together a series of classes for the Head Start teachers. It started by saying that every classroom should have a certain number of children and that there should be an aide in the classroom. I remember that being amazing, you know. It made such an impact on the field. It was such a breath of fresh air, and it's never stopped being a breath of fresh air.
They always taught us that we weren't to tower over the children, that we should sit in the seats, or we should bend to the point that we were leading the children so they would have someone to speak to and relate as opposed to great big adults.
If you individualize for every child in the Head Start program, then no child gets to flunk Head Start. No way. And that is a real success, in my opinion, when people understand that the individualization not only covers children with very special needs, but it covers every child and makes every child a winner and every parent happy.
In 1968, schools were integrated in the state of Mississippi, and Head Start provided me with the opportunity to be prepared to enter into the school system. I think that the Head Start concept and the Head Start model gave me the understanding of learning and the desire to learn. And to this day, I feel that that's what enabled me to continue all the way through my secondary education as an honor student, as well as to be a graduate of Emory University.
People were talking about prove that Head Start works. It's been in existence a long time. How do you prove this? Now, anybody who's run a Head Start program always knew that Head Start worked. They saw children who came in not speaking all of a sudden speak. They saw health problems be addressed. They saw parents going on to get jobs or become public speakers. And so we always had these success stories.
And the longitudinal studies that have been carried out by the high school through the very preschool program has certainly shown over the past 40 years that it's cost effective. It's certainly beneficial to the community that Head Start does allow that child to flourish.
Doctor, this person is not breathing.
My daughter, she had great experiences in Head Start, and she always remembers the passion the teachers have for their work. And she also remembers the family style servings, the meals, and she would do that at home. She would have us eat as a family. And the other things that she really recalls is the activities in terms of literacy, music, and songs. And she developed a strong passion of books.
The amazing thing about Head Start is that from the very beginning, the principles in which it was founded have remained true. You know, that belief that we need comprehensive services for children who come out of poverty homes, that we need to spend time thinking not only about their educational needs, but social services, parent involvement, health needs, nutrition. The whole comprehensive approach of Head Start was there right from the beginning, and that was absolutely right.
So you'll see that Head Start is not just an educational program, but it's totally comprehensive, and it also engages parents. So the parent part for the Policy Council, 51% of parents must be comprised on the council, and that's why we're here. So the Head Start Act The Head Start Act is really huge, but we're going to focus on Section 636, the statement of the purpose, 642, your functions. 642A I highlighted only because Head Start transition in alignment with K through 12. You'll hear about that, but not in today's presentation. 645, participation in Head Start programs. And then 648, TNTA, training and technical assistance, and that's why you're here for that. Overview of the Act. The purpose is to promote school readiness of low-income children, and we do that through a number of ways. We make sure that our curriculum supports growth in language, literacy, math, science, social and emotional development, as well as the creative arts, physical skills, and approaches to learning. And of course, we focus on low-income children and their families and provide that comprehensive education, nutritional, social, and any other services that families may need. And we do that through a family needs assessment upon intake. I had mentioned earlier about our centers. Our centers all must be licensed through the Department of Social Services. And through that, you can get any additional information on SouthCarolinaChildcare.org if you would like to look up all of the licensing requirements for that. Head Start also requires that once licenses are received, that centers enroll in what they call a quality rated improvement system. And that's their way of ensuring that we have ongoing systems in place to improve our services. Here's an overview of the Head Start performance standards. So the performance standards are supported by the Act. The performance standards that we're going to focus on today is program governance, which is at 1301.1 through 1301.6. And this is the shortest group of standards within the overall standards, the program governance piece is. Then we're going to do a little bit of 1302, and that's the part on eligibility, enrollment, recruitment, and selection. These are the other sections of the performance standards that we're not going to address today. You have a financial component, and you have a federal administrative procedure component, and then 1305 is your definitions. All right, so this is a breakdown of the program governance section. 1301 addresses the purpose. 02, the governing body composition and what's required. The third portion is the policy council and policy committee, for which we don't have a policy committee because we don't have a delegate agency. 1301.4, parent committees, training, and then point 6 talks about an impasse procedure, and we'll talk briefly about that. So when Aiken County Public School District was awarded the grant, they were identified as the agency that was awarded the grant, not the district. So anytime you see the word agency reference, you're talking about the grantee, the person that was awarded the grant, or the entity that was awarded the grant. So the governing body of the agency, which you guys are, have a legal and fiscal responsibility to administer and oversee the operations of the Head Start program. Then the composition. So it talks about the composition and what that should look like. Members of the governing body should have people on the board that have a background in fiscal, early childhood education, or a licensed attorney. Now you see there's an exemption. As a public entity, because you are elected officials, you don't know if those persons are going to have that. So there's a provision for that as well. If you do not have someone that serves on your board that have those criteria, then you have to make those persons available as a consultant to your board to do that. All right, the next part is the legal and fiscal responsibility for administering and overseeing the Head Start program. Includes the safeguarding of federal funds. Now you're really fortunate in that you already have a lot of federal funds that funnel through the school district anyway. So a lot of the procedures and policies that you're going to see here are already in place. You are responsible to fully participate in the development, planning, and evaluation of the program. Now, so we have Ms. Patrice Reinhardt Jackson, who agreed or volunteered or you elected to serve as a representative to the Policy Council. And we have also an alternate to the council, Ms. Haynes. Ensuring compliance with federal laws and regulations, and being responsible for other activities to include selecting the service area for which you're going to provide services. So the Head Start grant was actually an RFP proposal that came down straight from the Office of Head Start in Washington for 2 particular counties, in actually Aiken and Barnwell counties. So when the school district applied for the grant, of course, Barnwell County was a part of it. So we knew that we would be serving Barnwell County as well. That was approved. Also establishing procedures and criteria for recruitment, selection, and enrollment of children, reviewing applications for funding and funding amendments, procedures and guidelines for assessing and collecting information described in subsection D2. And I highlighted that in blue because we're going to talk about subsection D2 in a later slide. Reviewing and approving all major policies of the agency. So as you see, a lot of that stuff you already do now. So we're good in that area. Annual self-assessment, your financial audit, fiscal progress. I know Trey's here. I come to the board meetings. He always give an update on the fiscal side of the operations. Personnel policies and procedures are in place. Procedures for how members of the council are elected. Now, you already approved the bylaws, the policy council bylaws. That was done. Approving financial management and accounting. It talks about approving auditors in here. Reviewing any results from the Office of Head Start Monitoring. So we haven't had a monitoring review, but we will be having one probably within the next year. So you will be privy to the information that's provided as a result of that review. Then also approving policies and procedures, including any policies and procedures in the hiring, evaluation, compensation, and termination of the executive director, Head Start director, HR director, CFO, and any other person in an equivalent position. Now, let me make sure you understand that part of it. So with the ED, that's considered to be Mr. Lawrence. The regulations, when they talk about approving these people, they're talking about single service entities. So there are some operations that only do Head Start. That's all they do. So this is what they're really referencing. Because we already have a great HR department that have all of the procedures and guidelines in place for how we hire staff. So that's what that is. Other responsibilities, periodically update standards of conduct. You've already approved those as well, and we've had those standards of conduct signed off on. And establishing any advisory committees. And these advisory committees would be to oversee any key responsibilities as far as program governance and improvement to the program, but you would still retain your fiscal and legal responsibility. The governing body must use ongoing monitoring results, data on school readiness and goals, as described in 1302.102, and it's highlighted in red because it's going to be referenced later in the Head Start performance standards. And here are some of the things that information that you will receive to help you monitor and conduct your responsibility. Your monthly financial statements, any program information reports, enrollment reports including attendance, and reports on children who are in care or those who have partially subsidized care, which we don't. Any USDA, CACFE food and snacks, your financial audit, your annual assessment, any program improvement plans, community needs assessment, and any guidance that's issued from the Office of Head Start in the forms of information memorandums or program instructions. All right, 1302.102 talks about strategic long-term goals, so we'll be developing those, school readiness goals, comprehensive service goals, effective health and safe practices, for which we've already done our checks on all of our facilities before we even went into them. Monitoring program performance, ongoing assessment of program goals and the annual assessment, and then 3 times a year we do an assessment of children. We assess them. It's kind of like you heard in the video, like no child in Head Start, it's not a pass or a fail, it's an assessment. So we meet them where they are, and we propel them forward from wherever they start. Some children may come in here and other children here. So we individualize to make sure that our instruction meets the needs of all of our children. And then, of course, the advisory committees, you can establish those. If it's an established, and I already talked about that, you still retain your fiscal and legal responsibility. And if you did this, you would have to notify the Office of Head Start that you were going to have an advisory committee. Okay, the policy council. Each agency must establish and maintain a policy council. They're responsible for the direction of the Head Start program. Thank you. Policy councils must be made in accordance with the Act. So parents of children currently enrolled in the program can only serve on the policy council. And then the composition of the council, it has to be 51% of the entire council is that of parents. It has to be, that's the ratio. It has to be 51% of parents that serve on the council. And of course, the council or the governing body can't have a conflict of interest. So you can't have staff serving on the policy council as well. You can't have parents who are staff, but only if they work like minimally, substitute, very like not frequently at all. All right, and here are some things that the policy council in collaboration with the board must approve and submit. So these are the things that the policy council have to approve, but they submit them to the board for final approval. And it's things like your budgeting, your funding applications, budgets, reimbursement, bylaws, personnel policies and procedure. When they say personnel policies and procedures, it's really programmatic policies and procedures and how things will be operated. Standards of conduct. Thank you, Jeannie. Recommendations on the selection of the delegate agencies or the service area. So when we say service area for this grant, we're talking about Aiken and Barnwell County. However, once we do the community needs assessment and we look at the entire county, some entities decide to, they'll say, we're gonna focus on this particular zip code or this particular service area because we're finding that we have a higher number of low-income families or families that need our services in this particular geographic area. But for Aiken and Barnwell County, I can tell you it's spread all over. So it's not really one particular zip code. Okay. The Policy Council and Policy Committee must also use ongoing monitoring results to do their job. A term that can serve up to 1 year, can serve no more than 5 years, and they have to be elected upon each term. Then as far as reimbursement, a program must enable low-income members to participate, to fully participate and engage in the Head Start program. And that could be reimbursements for reasonable expenses. Some of the reasonable expenses could be childcare. If you need to come to a meeting, but you need nobody to watch your child, and you need childcare, then we can provide that through the grant. It could be transportation. We could either use our family advocates to pick you up, or we could do mileage reimbursement. Mileage reimbursement is typically what we operate under, the mileage reimbursement model. Parent committees. Now, parent committees are different from the policy council. So a parent committee is at the center level. Every center has a parent committee. 100% of the parents participate in the parent committee and have an equal voting right for any decisions that are made on the center level. The parent committees, they advise our Head Start program staff on things that will benefit them and services to make sure they are meeting the needs of the children. And their process to communicate with the policy council is that a parent that is elected from the parent center committee, they're elected to serve on the policy council. So that's the two-way communication from center to policy council to board. All right, training. An agency must provide appropriate training and technical assistance and orientation to the governing body and the policy council, include training on the performance standards and training indicated at 1302.12, and that's talking about eligibility, to make sure you understand what Head Start is and also the families that we serve. Now, an impasse procedure. If there ever becomes a time when the policy council and board doesn't agree on something, then we have to have an impasse procedure. And jointly, they must have, it must be in writing, and it must be for resolving internal disputes. And then these procedures they must demonstrate that the board considered the decisions from the policy council. If there's a disagreement, require that the board and the policy council notify each other in writing while either one don't agree. You describe a decision, make a process, and a timeline for when it's going to happen. So if it doesn't result in a resolution, then the impasse continues. The governing body and policy council have to select a mutual arbitrator, a mediator person who will come in and help resolve the dispute. And for all programs except for American Indian and Alaska Native programs, if there's no resolution reached, then the governing body must select a mutual agreeable arbitrator whose decision is final. So, you know, with Native American, so you'll have your tribal chief typically that will make the final decision on that. Okay, Jean, thank you. Now, eligibility, recruitment, selection, enrollment, and attendance. This is in 1302.1 subpart A. This is the guide for how we enroll children and how they get into the program. So we must train you on this as well. All right. So in order to be eligible to participate in Head Start, you can be a pregnant woman or child. Either one's eligible. You can be based on income, 100% poverty, or up to 130% poverty, but that's limited to 10%. The family is eligible for public assistance, including TANF, or the child is categorically, or mother is categorically eligible if they're homeless or the child's in foster care. So we don't even have to look at income guidelines when it comes to homeless children or children in foster care. And we use the same definition for homeless as the public school does with the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless. You can enroll up to 10% of your funded enrollment can be for families whose incomes are above the poverty guidelines. These are the ways that we verify the enrollment for children. So for income, these are the things that we'll ask for. Pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns, employer statements, or no income statements at all that will be notarized and signed off for the no income statements. To verify age, we use birth certificates or immunization records. To verify foster care, we use letters from the Child Welfare Agency, which is DSS, a court order or other legal or government issued document. To verify homelessness, we get a statement from the homeless provider, shelter, or the person that's providing shelter for the family. We also work with the school personnel or other service agency attesting that the child is homeless and any other documentation that would indicate that a child is homeless. How do we verify the residency? To make sure that you actually live in Aiken or Barnwell County. Driver's license, utility bill, rent or mortgage bill. And then for temporary assistance to needy families or Social Security income, we do a verification letter from the Social Security office or DSS. Now, we must maintain copies of these records. They must be signed by our program staff, indicating that they've made reasonable efforts to collect these documents. We do it by conducting in-person or telephone interviews. We've done a lot of telephone interviews and virtual interviews. That's how we've had to do it in this COVID period that we're in now. Then at the end of that form, we have to identify which category was used to determine the eligibility. So whether it was income, homeless, foster care, TANF, or if they were over income, because we want to keep up with those families too. You would not believe the number of families that sometimes come in and they're like $5 over the income threshold. You know they need the service, but it has to be a threshold cut off. So we typically refer those families to other avenues like DSS and child care vouchers, or programs that offer sliding scale fees, any way to try to meet the needs of the families. Then eligibility records, these records, they must be maintained for a year after the child stopped receiving services. Or it could be longer depending on the agency's rules for retaining records. But they have to be maintained as long as the child is enrolled in the program, and then for a year after that by the Office of Head Start is what they require. And then if a child who's participating in Head Start, once they're enrolled, they are eligible until the end, until they leave. So if they're already in Head Start as a 3-year-old and they turn 4, they're eligible for the next year. If a child moves from early Head Start, which serves pregnant moms up to age 3, then they have to recertify to be reapproved. If a program operates both an early Head Start and Head Start program, for which we do, then we have to consider those children who were matriculating from early Head Start into Head Start to give them more points so that they can get into the Head Start program and keep it going. So let's see who was listening. In the upper left-hand corner, it says, am I eligible for Head Start services? Thank you, Jane. Is that child eligible and why?
Child feels homeless.
Homeless, yes. Go over to the right. Do y'all remember this little girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Penny.
Penny from Good Times. Now, why would she be eligible?
Foster care.
Yeah, she was in foster care, so she would be categorically eligible. All right, down here on the left hand, Mr. Drummond and the boys. How did they start out? Yeah, orphan foster care. Yeah, so they would have been eligible. And then on the right, once again, homeless, eligible. What are the possibilities here? Family on the left, do y'all remember who that was? Good Times. How could they be eligible when they were little? Income, exactly. What about the family on the right? But remember that family? The Brave Buds. Over income, I think I heard it, that's right. They would fit into our 10% of over income, yes. Because I'm pretty sure they were over income. They had a maid and everything. Yeah. All right, so I talked about Head Start is federal to local, so Head Start is not anything that runs through the state of South Carolina. It's straight federal to local. So Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Office of Head Start is based in Washington, D.C. So that's where the money comes from. And then I put on the right-hand side, that's the skyline of Atlanta, Georgia, because the Office of Head Start has 8 regional divisions, and so our region is in Atlanta, and that's the Office of Head Start Region 4, and that's who Jeannie and I do a lot of talking, the Office of Head Start in Region 4. All right, here are some helpful websites. I did it. Oh. Here's some helpful websites for you. And if you would like to take a picture of that and do some personal, on your own time, Googling and training, it's right here. It's ECLAT, Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center. It has a plethora, just wealth of all kind of stuff on there. All right. I termed this back in 1999. I didn't know it was termed, and nobody was even listening until Scott Singer called me and said, hey, your quote made it in the New York Times. I was like, really? And he said, yeah. So just always remember, and this is what I live by, when the child is no longer the focus, you've lost focus. Thank you, gracias, guado, merci. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Shady. That was very informative. A lot of good information there. You were talking about, I want to go back and make sure I remember what you said correctly. I know with the over income, you said there's a 10% threshold. Is that correct?
For your funded enrollment, can be no more than 10% of children over income poverty guideline.
Okay. And before you got to that, right before you got to that, there was a, I think you said a 10% limit for extreme poverty. Did I hear that? Or
no, it's just 10% above the poverty guidelines. So 100 to 130% is considered to be over income, but we can only do 10% of your total funded enrollment.
Okay, and the other 90% as long as they're under that threshold.
Or, that's right, under that threshold or categorically eligible. Yeah, because you don't, if a family comes in and say we're homeless or have a homeless statement, we don't even have to go through the income.
Fall into the category. How many, I don't know the better way to ask this question, how many children or families, however you want to answer that, are we serving right now?
We are serving currently 265 children. So we're about 65%, 70% enrollment, but I think it's going to go up probably within the next, and we've already seen an increase within the last couple of weeks because we've had some billboards put up around town and stuff and had some radio ads, and so it's...
That's great. That's great. I'd love to see more participation. And then final question, I know y'all are held to the same standards because you're through us, right? As far as social distancing and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Have y'all been able to handle that well? I mean, y'all are a lot more interactive than like higher grades, you know, like one-on-one with a child. So just want to ask about that.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, well, first of all, we are not actually providing center-based services yet because we don't have our licenses to operate through DSS yet. But when we do return, we've already have our desk shields, our little plastic shields. They're very tiny for little ones. And we will do social distancing as much as possible with 3- and 4-year-olds. It's very hard to do that. And with, well, with infants, it's a little easier, infants and toddlers. But with 3- and 4-year-olds, it is hard.
Right. Well, thank you. We appreciate all your work.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So someone must have said I talked too loud, so they took my microphone away. Which is fine. I was curious, going back to the assessments that are done several times, 3 times during the year.
Yeah.
And maybe I just missed, and this is a little bit getting into the weeds. Where is the assessment criteria defined? Does that come from the federal government? Where can we look that up?
Well, actually, it's not defined. It's only defined from the standpoint of it has to be scientifically based. So we utilize the creative curriculum, and through that curriculum, it is scientifically based, and it touches every domain that the government requires that it does. So when we talk about literacy, health, and all those different areas, yeah, it does.
Okay. Is there some, and just in my spare time, is there somewhere we can read, get a sense of the curriculum and what we're trying to
Yeah, so going back to that website,
yep.
If you go back to right here, the first one.
I wrote that down. Okay.
You did?
Yep. Okay. And the last question is, so up till now, once it's going to be, the only Head Start program I'm aware of was, you know, the one that was co-located over in the Early Learning Center. And I was just wondering, what facilities are we planning on using for the Head Start program?
So we have facilities in Aiken at 203 Buford Street, Northeast. We have Manetta, and that's the town of Manila. That's at 298 Academy Street. We have Gloverville, 446 Lawana Drive in Gloverville.
Okay.
That's one that was relatively new and brought on. Then we have Wagner, Sally High School. That's something, I think 272 Main Street in Wagner.
Okay.
But it's in the annex portion of
Okay.
Wagner Sally there. And then we, in Barwell County, in Freeman, and that's the one I think you were referencing when you said.
Yeah, that's the only one I've been to.
Yeah.
So that's the only one I knew about.
In at Freeman, and
Yeah.
that's at the Freeman site. And in Barnwell, it's at the South Carolina Regional Housing Authority in Wingham Park. And that's in Barnwell, and then we have one in Williston at the same one, South Carolina Regional Housing. And then also in Blackville, we partner with Blackville Hillville Public School District, where Macedonia Elementary, we have 2 classrooms there.
Okay.
And the final center in Blackville is at Heavenly Angels Child.
So not centralized, pretty.
No, they're
what-
it's spread out.
Resources we have pretty spread out.
Yeah,
People-
so we
people
meet
get
the
to.
intent of the regulation when it talks about community assessment and defining where those children are and putting the programs where they're needed.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Ms. Reinhardt?
Good morning, everybody. First of all, let me apologize for running late. Secondly, I'm with Cam, they took my microphone, so I hope you hear me. So, I guess I talked too much as well and too loud, Cam. But Shady, I just want to tell you thank you. For those of you all who don't know, Shady Hall was the Head Start director when my kids attended Head Start.
Oh, you tell my age.
And I am just honored, honestly, that we have her as the current Head Start director because she brings with her a wealth of knowledge. And I'm so glad that Head Start, and you know, that you and I have talked about this numerous times over the years, that Head Start is under Aiken County Public Schools now because it'll make it a little bit easier of a transition for kids to go from Head Start program right into kindergarten and first grade. So I am glad to be a part of that, and I just want to say thank you, Shady.
And thank you for agreeing to serve on the policy council.
That's all. If nobody else on the board has a question, I do. First of all, I'd like, since we're doing this as mandatory training, could we get a copy, a paper copy of what you presented to put in the minutes? Just so we'll have it documented. And I'd like to study it more thoroughly than I can comprehend. My ability to comprehend auditory material is diminished with age.
Mine too, Doc.
So if we could get a copy of that, I'd appreciate it. I'd like a few more words about this impasse procedure. It sounds to me like the board is the governing body. We appoint a policy council. If there's a dispute between the board and the policy council, then we have to go into some kind of arbitration by a government official, because I don't know how that person's selected.
Yes.
Could you, I mean, I hope we never get to this and don't anticipate it, but.
Well, and I can say in my 15 years, we never got to that
But
point.
I'd just like to understand it in case.
That's right. But that is how it will work, is that you would go through an impasse, and there would be an arbitrator that's selected, and I'm not sure who would select that arbitrator. That would be something that the board would determine, how that arbitrator is selected. And then it would follow the rules as outlined within the regulations.
And this is a government requirement?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned too that we partner with Blackville. What essentially does that mean? Does that mean that we should have joint responsibility, or we are still the governing body and we work with them? Or
The board is still, Aiken County Public School District is the governing body, yes. And you still have the legal and fiscal responsibility. When I say partner, Blackville Hillville Public School District has provided 2 classrooms there, similar to the same setup as we have at Freeman Parenting Center. And they don't charge us any rent for that. They don't charge for the maintenance guys. They are very helpful. This partnership was developed back in 2011. And it's continued, which I'm glad to see that it's been continuing over the years. So that's the gist of the partnership, and they've worked really well with us. And whatever we ask for, they're always bending over backwards to help out.
thank you. How many years have you been with Head Start, just out of curiosity?
Well, let's start out when I was a Head Start student. So I was a Head Start student for 2. Okay, and now this is my 22nd year.
22nd year. Well, we
So
appreciate your service, thank you very much.
Oh,
And
thanks.
I certainly appreciate the presentation this morning, it's been very thorough. So thorough that I've got to go back and do the work.
Okay, all right.
But that's all right, I mean, I just think that it's important to understand these programs if we're gonna be responsible for them.
Correct.
Appreciate it. Anybody else have anything from us all? Well, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and that's great. We're gonna take a break at this point for 15 minutes, and if we could start back at 10:15, that would be great. But thank you, us all.
All right.
We're gonna adjourn for 15 minutes.
We have Elizabeth McLaren. She is our recruitment and staffing coordinator who handles all of our certified staff. Patrick Ott, he is a newer member to our team, a Midland Valley grad. He is our recruitment and staffing specialist who is responsible for our classified staff. And then Megan Cawthorn, she is our training and development coordinator. Anything 4.0, teacher development, all of the above. She's an amazing, amazing person. So 3 key members of the team are here today doing incredible work. So we're here today to talk primarily about recruitment and retention. We are going to go through, I do want to take the opportunity to give you a little history of an external audit that was conducted in 2016, so you have an idea of where we were. Yes, sir?
Maybe we can dim the lights over there.
Is that good? Okay. Then we'll talk about the recruitment strategies we've put in place, retention efforts we've put in place, our planned next steps. Then we'll also review some data that we've collected with exit interviews and our recent effectiveness survey. So an external audit was conducted of Human Resource Services in 2016, January of 2016. This survey, or this audit, identified several key areas of focus or opportunities for improvement. And several of those were directly related to our recruitment efforts. Some things identified, we needed broad recruitment efforts to improve our applicant pool. We needed budgeted recruitment funds based on effectiveness and return on investment. We needed an improved internal notification process for promotional opportunities. We needed district administration involvement in recruitment activities. We needed employment law and HR procedure training for district administrators. We needed improved screening and selection of applications based on qualifications, competence, performance, and probability of future growth. We also needed complete references and background checks for all selected candidates prior to hire. So those were all opportunities identified by this external individual conducting the audit that she identified as needing improvement at the time. They also identified several key areas of focus and retention, things that we needed to do, could do better. And some of those key areas included providing an orientation for all district employees, providing clear expectation and easy access to personnel policies, current and accurate job descriptions for all staff, consistent use of performance improvement plans with assistance and support for remediation where necessary, growth plans for all employees, a process to identify and encourage employees who display leadership potential, leadership training programs available to all staff, staff development responsive to the needs of individuals, small groups or departments, schools, and district-wide, improved integration and controlled access to employee records, and meaningful retention data from multiple sources. So again, these were things identified by the external audit that at the time needed improvement or needed some focus. So what you have in front of you is the 3-year strategic plan that we created as a team shortly after I arrived here with the audit in mind. And so we have implemented a number of targeted strategies in hopes of clearly improving or focusing on some of the areas identified. So we'll go through some of the things that our team has accomplished and has put into place. In recruitment strategies specifically, we've implemented a streamlined recruitment and hiring process, really building on a partnership between human resources and district administrators or hiring administrators of any level, so that we're providing support to them. We've expanded our job posting. Now we're also posting to some national sites, not just to our own website, which would include School Spring and Indeed. Now that's just job postings. We've expanded our regional college teacher recruitment efforts. They're really looking at a 2-hour radius around Aiken County and focusing on colleges and universities that have strong education programs. and targeted national efforts based on historical recruitment and retention. We do recruit from across the nation, and we did have multiple areas of focus, but we analyzed where we actually hired people and retained people so that we could focus and narrow that down. We've implemented a teacher referral program. Great teachers know great teachers. We've established applicant pool pipelines with targeted colleges and universities. So again, really working to build solid relationships with specific colleges and universities. For example, USC-Aiken, we continue to partner with them to improve the outcomes of their teacher graduates, as well as with Bowling Green University, where we have had incredible success in recruiting very high quality teachers and retaining them. And those teachers are now actively involved in that applicant pool pipeline of how we can continue to build that relationship with Bowling Green University. And we're actually getting ready to start providing student internship opportunities for Bowling Green students and expanding that partnership. We've updated the teacher transfer process. We wanted to ensure the availability of growth opportunities for our staff, balancing that with the need for staffing stability at the school level. We established an internship leave policy that would improve opportunities for current employees to complete their retired teaching internships. They used to have to resign to complete their internship, and they don't have to do that anymore. We've had two take advantage of that so far, and that's a very recent addition. So we're hopeful that will continue to encourage internal growth. We've also implemented very position-specific hiring events for high-volume needs. School food service workers, our transportation department, custodians, aides, some of our more high-volume position needs. In those hiring events, we partner directly with the department managers or school principals to have a large number of people come in scheduled and COVID safe to interview and potentially receive on-the-spot contingent job offers so that we can hire very quickly to fill those high-volume needs, still ensuring that individuals are adequately vetted. We've also established a process to internally promote advancement opportunities. Communication can be a challenge across the entire district as we're so far spread and diverse, and I'm sure that we'll continue to find ways to improve this. Last school year, we started sending the bookkeepers and secretaries at each school a posting to post in the teacher break room so that because not everybody's going online every day checking the vacancies, and we wanted our internal candidates to have access and knowledge that there were positions available. And so we saw some good benefit from that last year. We received positive feedback, and again, I'm sure we'll continue to improve that. But it was important for us to begin finding a way to enhance how we're notifying and letting our internal rising stars know of opportunities. We also established an annual aspiring administrator interview process where we provide priority consideration for those candidates when they're applying for leadership positions. They get the opportunity to interview with members of senior staff or cabinet. So it's good practice for them in the interview. They're able to receive positive, constructive feedback in that process. And then as we begin posting positions and seeking assistant principals, they do receive priority consideration. Priority doesn't mean exclusive, but it does mean priority consideration. They've taken active steps to improve themselves and to move forward in leadership within our school district. We've also developed annual and ongoing training for district administrators on hiring processes and systems. Systems can be frustrating. We know that. There are some necessary elements. So we do an annual training, and then we're continuing to provide recorded on-demand training sessions. And then we also have links to where you can read the instructions with screenshots to show you what needs to be done. So continuing to work on that. And we also established benchmarks with a visual management board for key performance indicators. If you walk into the HR area in our office, you'll see a board that is our key performance indicators. It's a visual management board so that we know how we're doing and measuring. There are a couple of key elements for measuring time to post. That was a complaint initially that it took too long from the time that somebody requested a position until it was actually posted. So we started measuring that with specific goals. And then how long does it take from that moment in time until we extend an offer to somebody? And how long does it take from the time we extend an offer until they actually start? So measuring the full time to fill process. And we do separate that out, and there's probably a better word for it, but we call it on cycle or off cycle. If I hire somebody in February to start a teaching position in August, and I use that time to fill all the way through August, my number is going to be a little bit skewed. That's not really reflective of that goal. So we really look at the off-cycle hiring of how long does it take, if you need a position now, how long does it take for us to get somebody in the door? Currently, we're running right at 30 days. Could always be better, but when we consider a 7-day posting period, interviewing time frame, and then giving notice at another job and getting into orientation, it's definitely an improvement. So we've also taken some steps in retention. We developed and implemented a new hire orientation for all new employees. Initially, orientation was primarily covering benefits and getting enrolled in benefits and retirement, and now all new employees start their first day of employment in a full-day orientation, learning about the school district, our mission, our values, all of our locations, understanding expectations, employee handbook, where to find policies, how to access systems, time clock. We go through everything with them. We also implemented a new hire buddy program. And so this is somebody who comes alongside. It's not a supervisor, it's a peer, somebody else in the building who can help. Where's the bathroom? Where's the copy room? Where do I get this? It's just a connection in a non-evaluative manner. And that buddy is a 3-year buddy. So they maintain connection and relationship over a 3-year period. Studies will tell you that relationships are a key reason people stay or leave. So we really want to help make connections very early on. And the buddy program was a step. And that actually came out of the Recruitment and Retention Task Force group that met for about a couple of years ago. It was one of the ideas that came out of that group. We also worked collaboratively with district administrators to develop a comprehensive onboarding plan for all new and transferring or promoting employees. So oftentimes when we think about bringing on a new employee, we get through the day 1 of orientation and that's it. Onboarding, though, actually goes from the moment the offer is extended and accepted through the first year of employment. And so we worked with principals, districts, leaders, and hiring administrators, some of their key staff as well, to build orientation plans customized by position, so that when they are hiring somebody new, they can pull that up, they have a template, they can make small adjustments. It's for their use. They're not turning it in or reporting it. It's for their use to help improve the overall experience through the first year of employment. We created an employee handbook that is updated and distributed to all employees annually. We implemented a structured progressive discipline process. What does that have to do with retention? Well, when people understand expectations and have clear outcomes, and there's consistency in outcomes, that does help improve morale and retention. We updated job descriptions and revised performance evaluations to link directly to job duties and responsibilities to help ensure a clear understanding of expectation and improve meaningful feedback. So this is primarily for our classified employees. Our teacher evaluation system is through the 4.0 system, it's through the state system. I'm sure there's a better word for that. But primarily our classified employees, their job description, the key duties and responsibilities of their job description are what are now in their performance evaluation. So we're evaluating them based on what we're asking them to do, what according to their job description they should be doing. There is also a section of the performance evaluation that talks about their connection to the core mission of the organization and where they see themselves, how they contribute and connect. But we really wanted to improve that feedback to all of our staff so that they really had a better picture of what was expected and how they were performing and what steps they could take to improve. In conjunction with that, we implemented individual development plans that are tied to the 90-day initial evaluation and updated in annual performance evaluations. Individual development plan doesn't necessarily mean that, it can be I'm a teacher and I want to add another area of certification. That could be it. It could also, though, be a school food service worker who wants to understand how to budget their finances better. Those goals are for them. It is a individual, personal development plan, and really is intended to help give them some goals and focus, and so that their supervisor understands what they want to do and can perhaps help encourage as they're looking at career pathing and what a next step may be. But we also wanted to keep in mind that for some, this is what they want to do and they're happy. Not everybody wants to be a manager or a supervisor. Some people are fully content where they are, but there's still opportunity for growth. And that investment and interest in our employees has significant impact on retention. We have recently developed Aiken Leads, a career pathway initiative providing professional learning guidance and support for all employees. The first step in that is launching Aiken Lead In, which has just been launched. It's designed to ready promising leaders for choosing and pursuing their dream career path by exploring career paths, exploring their individual interests, and having a better understanding of opportunities across the district. So we just completed the application process for that. We were hoping to have about 20 or so. I think we ended up with about 45. So we were pleased with the interest in that and are looking forward to the semester-long program, study. We've also established virtual on-demand supervisor training that had been identified, if you'll remember initially, had been identified as an opportunity and needed focus. So many of our new supervisors might have been a really great custodian, but never really received training on how to be a supervisor. And so we recognize that pulling somebody out of the job for days at a time is not really feasible. So how can we provide some level of training for them as they're getting their feet underneath them? This could also be tied to an individual development plan. If a supervisor sees leadership potential, they could recommend that they complete elements of or complete their specific classes. They can be done independently or as an entire group. In addition, we've partnered with GCF Learn Free. This is Goodwill's corporate foundation. They have an online gcflearnfree.org. If you ever want to check that out, it is an incredible virtual library of training and development in such a broad array of both hard and soft skill elements. There was no need to recreate the wheel when it existed. And so we reached out to them and received approval to partner and promote, to utilize that website for all of our staff. And so it is free, virtual, on-demand training and development modules, many of which they can earn certificates of completion in different elements, whether it's Excel or Word, communication. The list is very, very broad. And so we're very happy to be able to do that. And again, that's a good tool for supervisors in helping employees in the individual development plan to identify areas where they may want to grow, and it's a good resource to help provide them as they're seeking opportunities to do so. We implemented an attendance reward program. Now, that is currently on hold due to COVID, but looking at how we can incentivize individuals for coming to work and not taking a lot of time off. We implemented the exit interview survey, and we're going to review the most recent data today. We also enhanced the letter of intent process to solicit feedback regarding why an employee might be interested in leaving the organization or leaving their specific location. And we did get good feedback this year. It's the first year we did that. We did receive good feedback and were able to share non-individualized, summative feedback to our principals on why individuals might be interested in transferring to other locations. So, plan next steps. We are in year 3 of the strategic plan that you have in front of you. Each of the 4 areas, staffing, training and development, motivation and maintenance, are the 4 kind of bundled functions of human resources. And so each of those have a 3-year goal with annual objectives. And so we're in year 3 of that, and certainly haven't completed everything. We're in the middle of it. So here's what we're working on right now and planning to work on through the remainder of this school year. We want to build on established pipelines to expand school to work opportunities. We have graduates and completers within our walls who may be very interested in a successful career here at the school district. So we're working with counselors to engage in that. We have had a couple of recent success stories of employment. We've also partnered with South Carolina Voc Rehab and the same thing. So building pipelines of individuals that can work here within the school district. We are launching the Carolina Collaborative for Alternative Preparation Program, better known as Carolina CAP, which is an alternative certification program specifically for Aiken County. It is in partnership with USC and Carolina. And who is the other group that's partnered with?
It's an initiative between Carolina CAP, the North Carolina, South Carolina regional group, a school district, and USC. So it's
thank you. So one of the benefits is that there is no current alternative certification program that provides certification in special education or in early childhood or elementary, and this does. Our focus would be on our higher need areas or critical areas like special education, as well as math and science. So we're excited about launching that program. We're digging into really exploring career pathways for job categories. That started with our onboarding group, and they are moving into career pathways, and then we'll move into offboarding. So a number of elements that individuals are coming together and really contributing to what that looks like. So if an employee is hired as a custodian and says, what might be a next step for me, we'll be able to help provide them some level of career pathway that they could choose, whether that's vertical, horizontal, diagonal, whatever that may look like. We would be able to provide them some idea of what a career pathway could look like based on their interests and performance. We also want to utilize the information obtained through pre-employment testing to identify initial personalized training and development opportunities. We hear very often that people want individualized PD. And so we utilize what's called an EPI. It is an assessment. It identifies strengths and weaknesses or areas of opportunity. It's not a pass or fail, but we've implemented that, but we haven't necessarily taken it to the next step to really utilize the information that's in there, and that's on deck for us to begin doing that. And really, that's a partnership between the employee and their supervisor. We're just helping to facilitate the sharing of information and helping to answer questions and how they can use that. You know, our teacher completes that, and it's going to identify areas where they're really great and areas where they could improve. And so that really is where they could focus their PD the first year in those areas where they know walking in the door that they need some additional support. We also are working hard to collect and analyze both internal and external turnover data. You recognize that the number we often look at when we talk about turnover is an external, how many people left the school district. But we also have internal turnover. If you have a high turnover at one particular school where individuals aren't leaving the school district, but they're just leaving that location, going to another school, that is valuable information that we can utilize to determine those trends and to improve retention. So we're working on how we collect that information so that we can begin to use it actionably. And then finally, I mentioned briefly that we also want to establish an off-boarding process. So when somebody leaves, that we have, a more robust way that somebody walks through that process of leaving. Sometimes people leave for reasons. They may be staying home with a child. They may be relocating with a spouse. It's not always that they weren't happy here, and we may want them back. And how people leave can make a difference in whether or not they want to return. Or how they talk about us afterwards. So we want to make sure that people are leaving well when that happens. So that kind of covers that initial section of where we were, what we've accomplished, and where we're wanting to go in the future. And now I want to share some exit interview data with you. First, of those that were completed, about 78% were teachers or other certified staff. So it was a very large portion of our certified individuals, with only about 17% working in a support staff capacity, like a clerk, aide, maintenance, transportation. When we look at location, 51% of our respondents were from elementary schools, 27 from high schools, 16 from middle, and then a small percentage from the district office. So it gives you an idea of where the information is coming from. We asked what people liked most about working for Aiken County. And relationships was at 47%. That was the number one response, which is very positive because, again, studies have told us over and over and over again that people stay at jobs based on relationships, based on people. So having strong relationships is good. Other things that people identified included benefits, the culture and environment, leadership, a love for teaching, and professional growth. We also asked what they liked least about working here. 23% said lack of support. That was what they liked least. Other key things here, workload, leadership, the culture and the environment, a lack of respect, lack of communication, politics. So we did have a wide variety, but again, lack of support, closely followed by workload were the top ones. We also asked what improvements they could suggest, something that may make it easier, more challenging, more interesting. And the things that people told us they wanted or thought we could improve, 27% said we should provide more support and training. 16% said we should improve the culture and environment. There was a pretty large number that said, I don't know, or nothing. About 13% said NA. Improving workload was also on the higher end. Improving leadership and communication were also key responses. We asked if there were any other factors that contributed to their decision or anything that could have been done to prevent them from leaving. 22% left because of personal family relocation. So we know that that's an out of our control area. When focusing on turnover data, you have to be able to divide what can you control and what can you not. If somebody is moving with a spouse, there's not a whole lot I can do to change that. There was also a large number that said nothing or NA. But some key things that we could take action on, workload was very large, lack of respect and support, career opportunities elsewhere or lack of opportunities within the school district, And then we did have a number say mental or physical health and leadership. So a variety of responses, but still some good information. And then we asked overall how they would rate us as an organization. And I am very happy to say that more than 50% said excellent or very good. So it was nice to hear that from people who left the organization. That doesn't help us retain them because they're already gone, but it is good to know. And when we consider that 23% of people who left due to family and relocation, and then over 50% said that they were either would say we were excellent or very good, was positive feedback, and allows us to focus our energy and attention on other areas. Now, I mentioned that we were looking at how we could expand where and how we were getting our information regarding turnover. And one area isn't after they've left, but how could you potentially prevent turnover, and how do you know why somebody may be looking to leave before they make the decision to leave definitively. And so in the letters of intent, we asked that question. So 91% of our certified staff completed the letter of intent with 1,686 total reporting. Out of those, 19 certified staff said they intended to resign, 11 said they intended to retire, and 83 said that they intended to transfer. So of those that indicated they had an interest in transferring, we wanted to know why. 25% that they said they were seeking opportunities for growth. So that very well could be somebody interested as a teacher wanting a literacy coach, or wanting a CI position, or an assistant principal position, or an assistant principal wanting a principal. 21, the next there said that they wanted to move closer to home. So if somebody's wanting to transfer, not because anything's wrong with where they are, but it's a commute. And if there was an opening at a school closer to them, that would be a preference. Yes, sir?
Just to clarify, transfer is within the district?
Yes, sir. Within the district, yes, sir. 20 said other, so they didn't really want to tell us. And then other that were much smaller, some said they were overworked, some said they wanted to transfer due to health issues. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that was the reason they gave. Some said dissatisfied with environment, dissatisfied with their supervisor, lack of support, and poor communication. So again, I think we're seeing the same thing, a very similar theme from our exit interviews to the information provided in our letters of intent. The response rate, it was lower. This is the first year that we've done that. Continuing to build trust that if an employee says, I want to leave because I'm not happy with my supervisor, then I'm not going to hand the supervisor that piece of paper and say, Dr. Bradley said he didn't like his supervisor. And so we hope that we'll continue to build that trust with our employees so that we can get better and better information from them before they leave, so that we can continue to make improvements. And then finally, there was another recommendation in the audit conducted in 2016 to establish an evaluation instrument that would determine the quality of HR services. And so we did that. We did that in November. We surveyed all staff. You probably received that in an email. And so I just want to go over some highlights of what the survey results said. The first main category was access and availability. Primarily very positive results in having good access to HR employees for advice, receiving it in a timely manner. The one area here that I noted was people indicated that they didn't always know how to find the right person in the department to get the information they needed. So even though that information is on our website, that means that it's not meeting the need. Our employees either don't know to look there or don't see it there. Either way, they don't know. So we need to find a better way to communicate who to contact for what need. Reliability, we understand. This was all very positive feedback for the team. The staff said that HR exhibits a solid understanding of issues, a solid understanding of processes, and that the information they provide is accurate and helpful. So we received very positive feedback there. Training and development, individuals indicated whether they thought they got the training they needed to do their job, whether the training that they offerings were useful for their particular job, and whether the training was easy to understand. And so I printed in black and white, so I'm going to try and look at the board if y'all will forgive me. The unknown was really high in a lot of those areas. So, but we did have, so between the unknown and the neutrals, to me that is an area of opportunity. So we want to be able to improve that. So people either do know, or they agree with it. Those are the ones that I want to be able to push. How do I reach them, and how do we improve our offerings so that individuals receive the training and development they need specific to their job. Interactions with HR, whether we treat them with respect and answer their questions and concerns appropriately with confidentiality and courteous and respectful, and the feedback was very positive. So specific communication from human resources, providing information in a timely manner. Over 50% said that they agreed with that. We provide information that's accurate and easy to understand, also very positive. Providing information about changes in benefits policies and procedures, as well as changes in HR procedures that could affect their work. The vast majority of those responses were positive. So worksite communication, so not communication with an HR professional, but at their worksite, we wanted to assess that as well. And this feedback was very positive. Individuals said that they understood their role and how it impacted the district's mission. Their supervisor kept them informed, they got information when they needed it, and their performance standards were clear. Again, it was very positive feedback. Then we started asking questions about different programs and services, from job applicant screening and job posting to pre-employment testing. These were all current employees, and so a number of them were unknown. Well, they may not have been hired recently, so they may not know what the screening process looks like or what the applicant, the job posting process looks like. But the pre-employment testing, there was a note there, and it's in our next steps of helping people understand and better utilizing what that pre-employment assessment tool, what information it provides, how it can be used, and then using it on putting it into practice. And so we know that that's an opportunity. There's great information provided in that, and now it's time to start capitalizing and utilizing that information. Yes, sir.
Run back through real quick the job applicant screening. I think my attention diverted to a note I was writing.
No, that's okay.
I missed something.
Yeah. So there was a large, there you go. So there was a pretty large number of unknown for both of those. If the job posting process itself, almost half were unknown. And the vast majority of people that completed the survey may not have gone through that process. We surveyed the entire staff, and so we certainly haven't hired 3,000 people in the past year who have been through the existing processes, and so we did have a decent number say they were happy with it. It was great, but we had more say that they didn't know.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Then we look at new employee orientation, the employee handbook, and advice on employee or personnel issues. Again, we had a good number say we had a good number say in the employee handbook that they found it helpful. They found the new employee orientation helpful, and that they felt like the advice that was provided was helpful. We still have large pockets of yellows, and yellows are could go one way or the other. And so we know that there's continued opportunity for improvement there. Employee recognition. So that was one in particular I was a bit surprised by, but in some regard, you know, we have our annual Stars of Public Education, but we're hearing from employees that they want to feel recognized more than just once a year. So, you know, we did implement an ongoing district-wide employee recognition program beyond the call with shout-out cards. And so it tells us that we have a lot more work to do in working with departments and how and if they're utilizing that, and how we're recognizing people when they go above and beyond on a regular daily basis, so that our staff feel like they're recognized for the work that they do. And then individual development plans. We also know that this is kind of brand new, and we know that some supervisors are thrilled to be able to work with their employees to help them grow, and then we know others are still trying to understand how they can utilize that and how it will benefit them and their employees. Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt, but if I get to the end, I might forget something.
You're fine.
On the employee recognition portion, is it, and this may be answered in how this is delivered to the employees, is the recognition question mark a timing issue or how they're recognized? Does that make sense?
Sure. So I don't know that I know the answer to that question. So we asked very broad-based, how satisfied are you with employee recognition?
Right, so it could be a combination of two, depending on who you ask.
Correct.
Okay.
And you know, we look at, there's a fairly decent number of unknowns. So that tells me there are a lot of people who don't even know if we have an employee recognition program.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yep. The benefits and open enrollment process, as well as benefits information, we had a lot of folks say that they were very happy with that. I think our benefits folks do a fantastic job. And our partnership with Ward Services, they do a great job, always looking to improve. I did find the question on retirement information interesting. So normally we offer a retirement seminar. We were not able to do that this past year due to COVID, and so that may have impacted this. But it does tell me that there is need and desire. People want more and better information on retirement. Job-specific training, manager and supervisor training, and then off-boarding process. So, you know, the off-boarding process, a lot of folks have no idea. Well, that they work for us, so they probably don't know. That's not an unexpected answer. The manager and supervisor training, it was a piece of information that we've been receiving pretty consistently, and that whether you're a school food service manager, whether you're a head custodian, whether you're a transportation supervisor, that we didn't really offer a robust training in how to be a supervisor. So that was known, it was expected, and it confirmed what we were working on. That our employees and staff were saying this is something that we need or want or doesn't exist currently. And that is the end of the exit survey. I know that you're gonna have questions.
Anyone have questions for Mr.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. And I was just taking questions as you went through all that material. Do we have availability of whatever time frame you think is reasonable, like our 5-year retention of new graduates by university? Like, do we have more success? You mentioned 2, USC and Bowling Green. I'm sure we pull from a lot of places. Because I'd be interested in knowing if one program prepares them for reality of teaching in the classroom better than others, and what we can learn from that.
I agree, that would be very good information to have as we continue to drill down into our turnover and retention data. I know that what we analyzed initially, we were going to New York and Michigan and Ohio. And so that was the initial evaluation we did, was to determine the effectiveness and whether or not it was money well spent. And what we were finding is that our recruitment rate was pretty low, and then those that we did recruit didn't stay very long, except for Bowling Green. Bowling Green, first of all, they're the third, they're ranked number 3 in the country in programs for education. Their graduates all come out dual certified to include special education, and their retention and performance has been very, very good. But I do not have definitive numbers for all universities, but that is very good.
And the reason I bring that up, this is not data, but anecdotally, people pass comments that they're not sure that, and I won't name, certain programs don't prepare new teachers for managing the classroom or reality.
Yes.
And, you know, we have opportunity there. I mean, it's in our best interest, right?
So we have received very similar feedback, and we've taken very specific steps to partner between somebody here who's very strong in behavior and classroom management, who has a strong affiliation with a university, to work with that university and how we can improve that specific component. And so we are taking steps utilizing not just human resources, of course, but instructional staff across the district who have relationships with those universities to help make improvements. But yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. And just a couple more, these might be quick. So first of all, I want to thank the district and yourself for starting what I think didn't exist before as far as the exit interviews and the additional work that you're doing there. Because you can't fix a problem that you don't know about. You talked about the results of the transfers exit interviews. Can we get the results of the resignation exit interviews at a summary level?
The exit interviews were for exits, they were not for internal transfers. The internal transfers were from the letters of intent.
Okay, so I understand. So from the folks that resigned, do we have exit interview results at a summary level we could have?
Yes, sir, I can share this information. Yeah, that's the information I reviewed with you today.
Oh, okay, then I misunderstood.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I thought those were transfers.
No, sir. The
Okay.
exit interview data were for individuals who left the organization. One of the things that we're working on, and when we talked about kind of next steps, is how we better kind of cut and parse the data regarding retention and turnover. And so I want to be able to provide better information on why people transfer and why people leave. And we have not previously collected that. The letter of intent information is the first time we've even asked somebody why they wanted to transfer. So that is a next step of what we're working on.
Thank you.
Yes,
And I apologize for my misunderstanding. The last thing I got, and I didn't catch it when you went over it. Can you re-educate me on Carolina CAP? I didn't get it.
Sure, absolutely. Liz, do you mind now? Liz
That's fine.
She's the point person on it. If you want to come up and you can tell a little bit more about that.
Hey everyone, Carolina CAP is an alternative preparation program that is between the Center for Teaching Quality, which is a nonprofit organization based out of South Carolina.
Speak up a little bit for me.
I'm sorry, better?
Yeah.
Carolina CAP is an alternative certification program that is a state-approved program. It is between the Center for Teaching Quality, which is a nonprofit organization that works out of South Carolina and North Carolina, in conjunction with the University of South Carolina and the district that they partner with. And so this alternative preparation program looks for candidates in areas that are very difficult to staff, such as math, science. They are adding special education certification for this upcoming year, so we're really excited about that. This will be the only alternative certification program for special education. So as we continue to look at significant need for those teachers, this initiative is going to be huge in kind of filling that gap. Did that answer?
Yeah, that was a little bit better than what I heard the first time, just because it's a lot of stuff getting thrown at me, so I appreciate y'all going over that again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm done with this last one. I'm just wondering, I don't care where our good employees come from, but out of curiosity, what's our recent trend of in-state versus out-of-state recruitment?
Do you have that definitive number?
I don't have the definitive number, but I would say it's close to 80%
interject one thing while I think about it. With Ms. Hall, I'm gonna ask you to please furnish us a copy of all this in paper. In fact, I'm gonna ask Mr. Lawrence to instruct all presenters in the future that have presentations like this to give us paper copies, because it's too much to follow, and my eyes are so bad I can't read small print that far away, so
Yes, sir.
you're gonna have to humor the old handicapped guy for a while.
No problem at all. Happy to do that. Sorry.
I think Mr. Crane had a question.
Several of us do, so.
Yeah, I'll echo. It was very difficult to read some of the color codes. So I would echo that. That would be helpful. Just one question, because I jumped in a few times there, and I appreciate you entertaining me on those. Just high level with the exit data. Is that from now? Is that from last full school year? What's our window?
That was from last school year, from
Okay, so
1920
school year.
It was. And our response rate was low. So it was the first time that we have sent out exit interview surveys in quite some time. And the response rate was much lower than I would like it to be. So we're continuing to work on how we can improve that response rate. But it was from the 1920 school year.
Follow up then.
Yes, sir.
From that, roughly, what approximate number is fine. How many folks did leave us? And then you said low response rate. Can you give me a rough percentage of that number that actually completed that?
Sure. So I can tell you how many teachers left us.
That's
I
fine.
don't have our total number left.
I'm glad teachers is excellent.
So we had 203 teachers total leave, 50 of which were retirement.
Okay.
And the response rate of those that were sent out were about 3%. It's a very low response rate.
It is a very low response rate.
Now, exit interview response rates are typically on the lower end, but that was much lower than I was happy with.
Do we attribute any of that? COVID wasn't a listed item. I know some folks said health.
Correct.
Do we attribute some of that to COVID? I mean, anecdotally, I had a lot of conversations with specifically some folks that chose to retire because they were, age-wise, they were worried about, they were in the high risk categories, things like that. Do we attribute some of that?
So we had 8 teachers indicate that COVID was the reason that they left.
Okay. So a low percentage, very low percentage. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can you speak on diversity efforts in the district, hiring practices, specifically efforts to recruit African American male teachers?
Sure. So yes, African American male teachers are desperately needed, particularly in elementary schools where that number is very, very low. And so we have worked to enhance our targeted university recruitment with historically black colleges regionally, so Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and are always looking for additional opportunities to do so. It's been more successful when we have an alumni here who can help make that connection. It becomes more personal. This is a great place to be. And then, of course, we always attend, Liz just attended the yes. The number of acronyms, and I always say them wrong. But it is absolutely an area of focus for us, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, 2 quick things. One, has your strategy to recruit this year, has it changed, and how has it changed with the instructional model in colleges? In other words, how are you going about recruiting these colleges if they're not, meeting so?
Yeah. So that has been quite a challenge. So there have been a number of ways that we've done that. So initially, we were looking at doing lunch and learns at universities the semester before they entered their student teaching, so that we could meet, put our name in front of them, feed them, which is always positive for students, and then we couldn't do that this year. So this year, we mailed out packets. We worked with the Department of Education at the individual schools, and mailed out packets of information and some gifts that are logoed trying to help make those connections and then get information back, trying to find a way to connect with them, to put our name in front of them so that we're at least in a thought process when they're considering where they may want to go. The vast majority of colleges and universities have had online recruitment events instead of in-person recruitment events. So we have participated in all of those. That we've been able to, we have a cross-functional recruitment team, so principals and other members of leadership who work with us when we go to recruit. So it's not just Liz and Liz alone, maybe Liz and a school principal, or Liz and a literacy coach. It could even be Liz and a teacher leader who is an alumni from a school. So we've worked with those individuals to talk with them about their willingness and comfort level to do the virtual job fairs so that we're still making those connections. We are still doing in person. We're getting ready to host the recruitment event, our annual recruitment event that we do every year, but we did have to change it. So we couldn't have a large room of every school displayed and networking. We certainly couldn't do that. And we couldn't manage walk-ins. So it's, appointment only, very restricted times to come in, where you can sit, a limited interview team, and then follow up outside of that venue. But it does still provide the opportunity for somebody to see face-to-face, one of our principals or principal to see them face-to-face, and to make some recommendation on whether or not they would want to hire or would recommend that we hire that individual within the school district. So we've had to make a number of modifications, do things differently, but really working to still maintain our presence so that the graduates at the universities that we work with more substantially, still see our name, and our name is still the top of mind.
Yeah, it's marketing, right?
Yes, sir.
I said I had two things, but I have three. One I just thought of is on the exit interviews. I assume they're in-person exit interviews.
No,
it's
sir.
just a paper survey that goes out.
So it's an online survey, and so it does provide anonymity. So there's two schools of thought on exit interviews. One, it says it should be face-to-face, and you should get direct information. Another school of thought is that individuals are less likely to provide truthful information face-to-face, and they're more likely to provide truth if they believe that their response is anonymous. Based on the existing resources that we have within the department, I'm not sure that we would be able to meet face-to-face with every person leaving. I don't know that I have the staff capacity to do that, but we are always looking at ways to improve that.
I don't know, maybe an opportunity for both. Some might appreciate and be a little more personal with a face-to-face interview. You might be surprised. You might get a little more honest back face-to-face. I don't know. I think there could be some opportunity for improvement there on exit interviews and how you collect that data. The corporate side I'm used to, and you come from that. I mean, a little more of almost, you can't require it, but it's a little bit of a last step. Let's talk to the HR manager.
Correct.
Before you go.
And so when we talk about the offboarding process, the exit interview is a step within that offboarding process. So there are a number of areas that we're looking at how we can improve that information, okay. And have higher response rates, and yet still have accurate, valuable information.
I understand. So finally, I need to go down a little bit of a side road here.
Yes, sir.
Not really recruitment and retention, but I've got a specific scenario in mind, but I need to be general here. So in the hiring process, where in the organization does the responsibility lie for the background check and reference check and on a candidate?
Yep.
Is it the hiring manager? So how does that work, and what do we do with that information?
Right. So that information, the responsibility for ensuring all of that information is complete and accurate falls on human resources. The hiring manager certainly can make a phone call to check a reference, and they used to have to check a single phone reference with the most recent supervisor. However, we found that it was not being done consistently or being necessarily documented consistently. And so we do, human resources does complete that. And again, the hiring manager, the principal or that hiring manager does have the ability to do so. We were looking at how can we partner and relieve, the principal has so many areas of responsibility. How can we relieve some of that information? We're still communicating with them, we're providing them or sharing if there's any red flags, if there are any issues, then we still communicate, share that information, have conversations about whether or not they want to move forward, whether or not we would recommend they move forward, if the red flag is so substantial that we're going to say no. So we're still working as a partner. And that really is, so the responsibility falls on human resources to ensure it's done. It is a partnership in completing it.
Yeah, the scenario I have in mind, which maybe I'll share with you later,
Sure.
Is a real concern to me, and it all boils down to how do we avoid hiring someone else's problem,
Sure.
right? So.
Right. That's always the goal, and references are only as good as the information that somebody else is willing to share.
Yeah. Not only a problem, but how a problem that could put us in a liable situation in many cases. Some
Sure.
cases.
And we do verify all of the State Department information. So, you know, we run a state criminal history check. We also run a national criminal history check. We obviously run the sex registry. But in certifications, you know, we check their out-of-state certifications for any sanctions. We check their South Carolina certification for any actionable items. We also in South Carolina now have access to their evaluation history. So we have a lot of places that we can look for information. You know, again, that information is only as good as what was documented, and sometimes you may find that a particular situation wasn't documented well, and then things are uncovered. But I'm happy to discuss a specific situation, and if there was an error made or something missed, I absolutely take responsibility for that and investigate to ensure it doesn't occur again.
Okay, maybe we can chat, thanks.
One quick follow-up, Mr. Saul.
Yes, sir.
Do you ask the applicant, have you ever been fired or disciplined on the job?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Hanks?
Just two quick questions, Ms. Hart. In general, the survey I know is voluntary, but do we have any idea why there's such a discrepancy? The elementary level response was wonderful, not so much on the high school, and pretty bad on the middle school level. You know if that's administrator push or why we're not getting the responses?
I don't. It's an individual choice to complete that.
Mm-hmm.
So with 51% coming from elementary, my initial thought is that we have a higher number of employees in our elementary schools, and so it simply may be that we have more elementary employees leave. But no, I don't have a specific answer for that this time.
Okay, and the last question is general too, but when we say or get a response that says lack of support, that term has been used for a while and it is so vague. Do we know or ask, please explain, what does lack of support mean? That could be a number of things. If it's a consistent response and certain people are saying the same thing, then we can address that issue, but do we even ask, what does lack of support mean?
So it's a very good opportunity for us to drill down. You know, this was the first implementation of exit interviews, and now we have some baseline information that we can use to make that process better and to provide some additional drill down where we want or need more information. And I agree, that is a very common term used, a lack of support, and it means different things to different people. It is difficult to assess. I would say the same as for culture environment. You know, it's very difficult to assess what do you mean when you say you left because of the culture or environment. What was that? So there are certainly some additional elements that we would love the opportunity to get additional information on, and as we continue to improve the process, my hope is that we will.
That's where I think that sorry, buddy, the in-person interview gives you an opportunity to expand on that a little bit. I think you may be surprised with the.
Right, and I'm not minimizing that there are certainly value in that. When we have about 200 people all leave at one time, sometimes it's a matter of resources of being able to do that.
But you, just as a suggestion, you could add someone could request a face-to-face meeting on that survey.
Correct.
And then you could limit it to the folks that want to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
We could.
If there are no further questions, Ms. Hart, Next presenter needs about 5 minutes to set up her presentation, so I'm gonna declare a 5-minute break. It's 11:20, 11:25, hopefully we'll resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Oland is going to share some assessment information, somewhat limited because of the circumstances of the year, but what we have, we're going to share with you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, board members. First, thank you for all you do each day to support, and my colleagues here as well, to support Aiken County's most precious resources. For the last, this last portion of our session today, we're going to examine some of our student achievement data. But for the benefit of our newer board members, I'm just going to take a few minutes to review some metrics and some vocabulary that will provide some context to some of the data that we're going to look at. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So first, I'd like to start with our mission statement, because everything that we do regarding measurement ties back to this mission statement. We know that we want our students in Aiken County we want to cultivate future-ready students through a literacy-focused approach. We want each student to acquire the knowledge, skills, and dispositions. Yes, sir?
Excuse me, Ms. Owen. Is there a way we can get that stream of lights that run right above the screen? Maybe that could help Doc and I see a little better, because it's a blur. Just that one. It's no different to me.
It's better if we turn them off.
If that helps, I'm good.
That's better. That's better.
Okay. I know my vision has just gotten incredibly poor as well. So as we go back, we want students to have the knowledge, skills, and dispositions. We want them to be prepared to thrive in college, in career, and life. And so in order to do that, we need to find out how, if we're on that trajectory. How can we find out if we're being effective in accomplishing those goals? We measure, we use assessment in order to determine that. We use in Aiken County Public Schools a balanced assessment system, which often is confused as a balance of equal number of assessments, formative, interim, summative. It's really a balance of information for our stakeholders and our consumers. We want to make sure our teachers have what they need, what you as board members have what you need, what the superintendent needs, what our external stakeholders, parents, State Board of Education, and federal have what they need. So we use formative assessments. A lot of classroom happens every day in the classroom, sometimes minute by minute. Interim assessments, such as our benchmark assessments, would be the closest example in Aiken County schools. And then summative assessments where we evaluate actual achievement or how we did. Typically end-of-year assessments, SC Ready, PASS, EOC, some of those that you're familiar with. Next, there's two metrics, and we talked about this, which seems like a lifetime ago, but it was just earlier this summer. We talked about the Lexile and the Quantile measure. These are two important metrics that we use to monitor a student's trajectory to college and career readiness. Lexile is a unit of measure of a student's reading ability, and it not only is just the reading ability, but it places the reader and their resources on one scale. So we know if a reader can read at this ability, that we want to pair them with a resource, a book or text that is about that same level, or 50 Lexile points higher or lower. And that Lexile level is about what a student can comprehend about 75% of the material. So we pair those. Our state standards that we're teaching have Lexile levels. Our passages that we provide to students have a Lexile level. If you go to a Scholastic book fair, you can put an app on your phone and say, if you know your student's Lexile level, your child's, that this book is appropriate for them. And so that is Lexile. So we monitor that here in Aiken County, and we're very fortunate that we have two assessments that allow us, one to monitor Lexile, but then we also have one for Quantile. When we talk about Lexile, for 30 years, psychometricians have been studying the concept of text demand, what it takes to read certain materials. And I know we reviewed this in June, but certain textbooks, SAT, the SAT tests, newspapers, they all have a corresponding text demand. So we want to ensure that every student that graduates from Aiken County it can read on a Lexile level that will allow them to be successful, as we talked about, to thrive in career and life. We want them to be able to read a newspaper. We want them to be able to vote. We want them to be able to read instructions on installing car seats and setting up technology in their homes. And so Lexile is important, and we track that.
Could you tell me what the numbers mean?
Yes, that is actually the Lexile level.
I know, but what does that tell me?
That tells you where a student is on that trajectory of
what's average for a high school graduate?
There isn't an average. Our goal in Aiken County is a 1,300 Lexile, and that we know sometimes not all students will, achieve that 1,300 Lexile, but that is our target because we want them to be prepared for college and career. And if you look at what it takes for university, the textbooks that you would use in a post-secondary university, they're about 1,300 Lexile. So we want them to be able, if they decide to enter a four-year university, to be able to read and understand the materials that they'll be presented with. So that's why we're at about 1,300.
It's sort of an arbitrary number, or is it a standard score, or?
It's not an arbitrary number. It's standard score. And
is it scaled? Is it scaled?
It is. It's scaled from actually below 0, beginning reader level, and then all the way up to 1750 is the highest.
The thing that's throwing me is that for years I've heard that to be able to read a newspaper, you read it about a 4th grade level. I guess that's no longer the case.
No, I mean, you'll see some, depending on what the newspaper is, they do vary. USA Today, 1,200, New York Times, 1,380. It depends on the newspaper. And so things vary, but even federal tax return, what is that? I can't even read that, 1260 something. So, that's why we're at that 1,300. That is our goal. And Quantile, which we'll just discuss in a minute, our Quantile goal is about 1,350 for students.
Do we know what the actual Lexile level for our graduates is? I know what we aspire to, but knowing also that there's a thing called the normal distribution of intelligence and most other abilities, we're not going to reach it. So do we know what our average is?
One of the things that we do is we administer this assessment to second graders through 10th grade.
Oh, so we don't do it to seniors?
No, we've not, and that's something we have been discussing a lot recently, is that we want to try to because we say if we want students to be at a 1,350, now the Lexile targets for 11th and 12th grade are about the same. So even if we don't continue up to 12th grade, if we were to at least assess, 11th graders, we would have that. But in a minute here, you'll see where our 10th graders do fall in relation to that. On the mathematics side, for numeracy, the corresponding metric is quantile. It's a little bit different than Lexile in that it tells what a student is ready to learn. It doesn't tell them right where they're at right now. So again, every South Carolina state standard, when you're teaching mathematics, has a corresponding quantile range, so that you know if you know your student's quantile, that you could group them and you could say these students here aren't prepared to learn this material based on their current quantile level. They need some prerequisite skills, some things that we need to do before they're prepared to learn that. So the Quantile Framework Lexile, same organization, same psychometricians, Metametrics. They started Quantile about 30, or Lexile about 30 years ago. Quantile is only about 17 years. But over the last 2 to 3 years, states have been adopting this. And test companies and resources have been aligning their materials with these two frameworks, so that our South Carolina end of the year assessment, the SC Ready, it yields a Lexile, it yields a Quantile. Some of the other resources that we use in our schools also generate that.
May I?
Absolutely.
RI and MI. Now, correlate those with this.
Okay, so reading inventory is the screener that we use, the assessment we use that generates the Lexile. Math inventory is what generates the Quantile. So that gives us, those two assessments give us these two measures. And we administer those 3 times a year, fall, winter, spring. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much.
Okay. So next I'm going to move to just kind of a trend that has happened, and this will tie together in just a minute. Over the last decade or so, a significant shift in how we do course planning, where it used to be very instructor-led in that you chose your textbook, then you designed your lessons, and everything flowed from there. Now we use a concept called backwards design. Begin with the end in mind, our Leader in Me schools. Where do we want a student to be? And we know we want our students to graduate college and career ready, and we have definitions of what that means in Aiken County. And in order to do that, we plan backwards. So what does it mean to be college and career ready in Aiken County schools? First, we want them to meet the profile of the South Carolina graduate. That's that knowledge, skills, and dispositions. We want them to meet their state standards, which we align our curriculum to those standards to ensure that they're getting all that content knowledge. We strive for them to have a minimum of a 13 Lexile upon graduation from high school and a 1350 Quantile for the reasons we just discussed. Then we want them to demonstrate the state, strives for one, either a college or a career readiness indicator. We strive for our students to have both a college and a career readiness indicator. And those indicators are either 20 or higher on the ACT, a certain level on the SAT, to take an advanced placement course and get a 3 or higher, which is typically the score required for college credit, depending on the institution. 6 years, there are 6 hours in a dual enrollment class. That's on the college side. And on the career side, the ASVAB indicator, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, minimum score of a 31 or higher, which is the minimum score that will allow you into one of the armed services. A silver or higher on the WIN Career Readiness Certificate, be a career technology education completer, or complete a registered apprenticeship. So those are ways in South Carolina that you can demonstrate career readiness. We strive for our students to have both. So when we look at that in Aiken County, this is kind of meshes how we looked at this at June, and I hope it's helpful to the newer board members, but that we know on the right side, that is where we want our students to be, to meet the profile of the South Carolina graduate, have a college and career readiness indicator, be engaging in mathematics, about a 1350 Quantile, and engaging in literacy, about a 1300 Lexile. So through backwards design and backward planning, we map that all the way back to kindergarten. So the lower part of that graphic is our grade level, kind of a continuum, and the upper part is how our assessments fit in. we do reading inventory and math inventory in the fall. If teachers wish to utilize any of our common formative assessments, they may. Those are common assessments that have been designed at certain checkpoints in the curriculum, and those are optional, or they can design their own. And we have our benchmarks, which is really our indicator of where students are to meeting state standards. Our correlations on our benchmarks to our end of year assessments are very high. And then in the winter, we do the reading inventory and math inventory pulse check in the winter, have a benchmark assessment, and then in the spring, we have another pulse check. All designed to ensure that at the end of the year, students perform well on their state standards and have mastered the content that we want them to master. So that's how we have backward designed in Aiken County schools. We want our students on math. This is our trajectory in a different way, all the way from down in kindergarten to where we want our students to be upon graduation with their quantile. And then on the Lexile, the same thing. So this is a very continuous process of evaluating data and information in order to inform the continuous improvement of our programs and to see where our students are. So like most everybody in the world right now, whether it be state, at the local level, the state level, the federal level, and globally in the face of this pandemic, people are asking those questions. How are our students doing? So I've tried to frame this material from these kind of three questions. How are they doing? How did our students perform in fall and winter relative to a typical school year? Specifically, I'm comparing to last year, and in some cases 2 and 3 years. And then finally, have students made learning gains, and how do these gains compare to what we would experience in a typical year, non-pandemic year? So what indicators do we have that we can examine? This is what we have administered so far. The Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. This is a state-required assessment designed for kindergarten readiness, to assess kindergarten readiness. It's required of all entering kindergartners. The kindergarten and first grade Fast Bridge Assessment. That assessment was required by Act 213, not that particular one, but that we select an assessment of some available state-approved assessments, and we had a really incredible committee that worked for over a year on selecting that. This Act 213 was primarily designed to ensure that everybody has a universal screener in place to screen for kids at risk of dyslexia. And there were several that were offered as options by the state, and this is the one our large committee approved for Aiken County. So I just have to give a real shout out to our kindergarten and first grade teachers this year, who from the spring not only had to learn a new assessment, but had to go through rigorous training on that assessment, and then administer, in addition to the state required one, the KRA, the Fast Bridge screeners, to every kindergarten and first grade student, and they just knocked it out of the park. I mean, they really, the number of students that they assessed, they did a fantastic job. And in hindsight, I will say I sat in that committee too, and although I didn't have a vote, it wasn't my first choice. But now that we are into it, we are really seeing it is a great screener. It's yielding some really great actionable, detailed information. So we have that, kindergarten and first grade. Then we have the second grade COGAT in Iowa, Cognitive Abilities Test and Iowa assessment. That is an assessment that's census, administered to all second graders, called a census test. Primarily in South Carolina, used for the identification of gifted and talented students. But it yields grade information that we look at to see where our second grade population are. So we have that, and then as we discussed in grades 2 through 10, we have the reading inventory that generates the Lexile, and grades 2 through 9, the math inventory, which generates the Quantile. Is there any questions so far?
The COG AT and the hour are nationally normed?
Yes, nationally normed, Fabridge nationally normed.
And the reading inventory and math inventory are local, but they do have some reference to.
No, they're not local. Those are, I can't really say they're national. There's hundreds of thousands of students in the country that take reading inventory and math inventory each year. So we have a lot of good data on those. So now we're going to start to get into achievement data. In some of these cases, I'm going to try to drill down to modality at some point, meaning did students participate in the They Can Innovate program, or were they face-to-face hybrid model? So for that, I just thought it might be helpful to really quick kind of look at the demographics of where we were in semester 1 with Aiken Innovate and where we are in semester 2, how that breaks down. And there really wasn't any changes. I was kind of interested in that. Blue, the bar is Aiken Innovate. The orange bar are those that are face-to-face and hybrid. So we have slightly more females in the Aiken Innovate models than we do males. And that stayed pretty consistent from fall to when we start again on Monday for that migration. When we look at ethnicity of our largest populations, which are Black, Hispanic, and white, these also remain relatively unchanged. We have a higher percentage of African Americans participating in Aiken Innovate. And again, those stayed pretty consistent from fall to winter. When we look at poverty index, we'll see that there's definitely a higher percentage of students in poverty that chose the Aiken Innovate virtual model. Our district average is 64%. Poverty index, and we had about 71% of those in poverty selecting the Aiken Innovate model, and again, stayed pretty consistent from fall to winter. Now, the first assessment we're going to look at is the kindergarten readiness assessment. And just quickly, you'll see over the...
Could you back up just a second?
Absolutely.
The one that you have, the ethnicity, the blue still stands for Aiken Innovate, and the orange stands for
Let's go back.
face-to-face.
Yes.
Okay, now is this all, what ethnicity are we looking at?
You can see in the bottom, and I know it's small print,
Okay,
hopefully you can read your screen.
I'm backwards this time, I can see better there than I can here, so
Okay.
I apologize. Go ahead.
So Asian, Black, Hispanic, multiple ethnicities, white, and other.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. The first assessment we're going to look at, I'm just going to get there, is kindergarten readiness assessment. And you'll see, and we, I think our student population in kindergarten is 1577 or something like that right now. So virtually every student took the kindergarten readiness assessment. This is the 4th year that we've administered that assessment. You'll see this is just number of students. Our general population down a little bit in kindergarten from a high of 1827 in 2017 to 1568 this year. So there's 3 domains, or there's 2 domains really here, but there's an overall score, which is in blue. And you'll note that over the 4-year period, 3 years, the first 3 years in 2017, 2018, and 2019, we had the virtually identical composite score for all of our kindergarten students over that 3-year period. And you'll note that it drops this year in 2020 for the first time. The language and literacy domain follows a similar kind of trajectory, 265, 263 consistent, and then 260 this year. And then the mathematics domain didn't drop off quite as much, but a little bit as well. So those are just the composite scores, but what does that mean from students' overall readiness? And that's how the kindergarten readiness assessment yields a kind of a descriptor. It indicates whether a student is demonstrating readiness, they're approaching readiness, or it's emerging readiness, being the lowest category. So I kind of drew that red line through there to show you that over the first 3 years that we gave that assessment, we were very consistent again with those demonstrating readiness. We were at 33.4 in 2017, 35% of our students in 2018. And you can see right away what happened in 2020. Less than 20%, yes, sir.
When did we administer KRA?
KRA is administered in the first 45 days of school.
Okay, so this is what, the fall?
Yeah, it's designed not to only identify a child's readiness for when they arrived on our door. And we pretty much administered that assessment well before the first 45 days. So you'll see though that kids that entered, we only have 20% of our entering kindergartners that are demonstrating readiness for kindergarten. So that was a pretty significant finding. When we looked at what, again, not a difference in modality, but enrollment, we wanted to ask the question if there's any differences if a student participated in a pre-K program offered by Aiken County than that had, we don't exactly know, some could have been in a daycare program, but we broke down those that were in a pre-K program in Aiken County versus those that were not. Working today, folks. Now I got it right there. Just one. No pre-K program on the left side of this screen, and the pre-K program readiness levels on the right. You'll see that those that participated in Aiken County program, 24.4% of those demonstrated readiness versus 17.2% of those that did not participate in an Aiken County program. So we're encouraging to see that, and I think we all know that early preparation is key for kindergarten. And we've experienced that similar difference last year. Next, we're going to look at the FastBridge data. This particular graph is overall, all of our students in the district. The lower portion of the graph is our kindergarten left, and on the right is our first grade students. And this is from fall to winter. You'll see that 19.1% in the fall of our kindergartners scored at risk for reading difficulties. And if we look at that same group in the winter, we had a jump to 34% of our students in kindergarten are at risk. So, and then if we look at the first grade, you'll see that we were at 32.7%, and in the winter, 34.6%. So not a big difference at all at first grade, but at kindergarten, a pretty significant jump in the percentage of those kids at risk. And that's a kindergarten level. First grade, not significant difference. Is there any questions on that so far?
You know why?
I mean, I think we all can have some, reasons. I mean, these are indicators. I think it's just
I know,
about-
but, what it shows is that, to me, is that they get worse the longer they stay in school, in kindergarten. And, slightly worse in first grade, so we're doing it. I mean, if you really want to be literal about it, you could say we're making them worse.
No, I think it's more that, these are nationally normed, that our kindergarten students, this is when they entered to fall. We didn't have access to them as many days as we typically would. I think, at first grade, the difference is less because they already had some reading skills under their belt. Kindergarten students are our earliest, readers learning to read. And I think when we look at the next slide, which, when we examine it by modality, that it helps inform some of those differences. If we look at our, the fall on the left, winter on the right, our Aiken Innovate students in the fall when they entered, 14.8% of them were at risk. If we move to where they are in the winter, follow that arrow over. Does this have a, there's a little laser pointer thing. Follow that over, 14.8%. But when at the winter, 48.8% are at risk. That's our AI students. We following that? Then we look at our face-to-face students. When they entered in the fall, they were at approximately 20% were demonstrating at risk, and that did jump up about 10% for those face-to-face students.
Mr. Nussel has a question.
Mr. Crane was first.
Ms. Sullivan, thank you. This is very good information for us to know. And I think to your earlier point, it probably drives out a lot of thoughts that have been shared with us and the public and opinions about why this is happening. And obviously, all the pandemic factors are everything having to do with that. I don't know if I'm getting ahead here or not. I don't necessarily need this right now, but it would, I would just like to see maybe the last couple of years of data as well, just to see, like, this is the first full pandemic year so far. Last year was essentially a third half pandemic, and the year before that, of course, nothing. I wouldn't mind seeing historic trends to see, in contrast, how this year compares at some point. I don't necessarily need that today, but if you would mind email that to us, I think that benefit me, it probably benefit somebody else too.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have FastBridge data.
No, this is our first year for FastBridge. We have reading inventory and math inventory. You have a few years of KRA data here, a few years of COGAT, ITBS here. And then as we move on to reading inventory and math inventory, I look at some growth patterns in a couple more slides.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just making sure, so with FastBridge, is it a progressive standard where the standard changes from the fall to the winter? Or is it the same? Or is
It's benchmarked.
Okay.
A composite, a benchmark score that shows where students should be. So these are all benchmark scores nationally normed again.
Yeah, so, yeah, I don't necessarily do assessment speak, but just make sure I understand that you would, FastBridge assumes that you should essentially learn something from when you enter school to a winter break, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Certain skills.
So just like, and this is not a question for you, but just like, my point would be, I'm not making a conclusion, just like some folks maybe we had more students at risk at the beginning of this school year because we didn't have school the last 9 weeks of the previous year. The reduced schedule schedule may have impacted so that we're making progress, but not as much as we should have, because of our reduced schedule, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because those benchmarks are dated, right? So the bench different from the benchmark for winter.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Appreciate it.
In other words, it assumes, like an IQ test, they assume that a 5-year-old knows X number of questions correctly. They assume that at 6 years old, a child has another number of questions. If the average number, doesn't change really in terms of the ratio between chronological age and mental age, the IQ remains the same. But if it's a severely handicapped child who doesn't acquire the same amount of information that the peers acquire, then that IQ could decline, like in a brain injury or something. Are you assuming that the average child will learn a certain amount of information between the two measures, or is it just all the same questions, same number of right answers, same score?
This is more skill-based, so it's phonics, it's reading ability.
But can you answer the same questions? If I answered the same number of phonetic sounds or whatever, when you administered it the first time and I answered the same number the second time, I haven't lost anything, but I haven't gained anything, my score would go down.
Yes,
Thank you, that's what I needed to know.
that's correct.
Anybody else? Thank you.
So we move on to first grade reading. You'll see that, again, Aiken Innovate students, this is modality. Aiken Innovate students, if you follow their blue bar or jump over to them to the winter, we had 28% at high risk in the fall, and that moved to 32.5. So these differences at first grade are not anywhere like they are at kindergarten. Kindergarten, we saw some significant differences from fall to winter, but not nearly as much in first grade. Next, FastBridge math component. You'll notice that from fall to winter, there was approximately about a 10% increase in those students at risk. And in first grade, again, virtually unchanged. First grade's just about the same. When we look at math and modality, you'll see that on the math side in the Aiken Innovate, even in kindergarten, the differences weren't anything like reading. We did have a jump from our AI students and the percentage of those at risk in kindergarten and math, but nothing like reading. Oh, that's just what I just spoke to. When we look at the cognitive abilities test, this is over a 3-year period. The composite scores are on the left over a 3-year period, 2018, 2019, and 2020. Composite score pretty consistent over 2 years, dropped a bit in 2020. You'll see this cognitive abilities test has 3 domains. It measures nonverbal, quantitative, and the verbal domains. And you can see that for 2020, the scores have dropped. The national percentile rank has dropped significantly for the cognitive abilities test. Again, this is second graders. The Iowa test, which is truly a achievement test of general knowledge, what they have learned, where the other is a reasoning, cognitive and reasoning test. You can see that these are national percentile ranks again, that from 2018 and 2019, we were at the 50th percentile, pretty consistent, halfway nationally. And that on reading that dropped to 34% nationally and to 30% on mathematics. So I apologize that these are small, but I really wanted them to be side by side, so hopefully you can see them better in your screens. But I wanted to see where we were last year when we entered the previous academic year in the fall to where we are, this year in the fall. And you can see that it's pretty consistently, students entering this year had lower Lexile levels than those entering last year. That's probably no surprise there. They level out certainly beginning about 6th grade. They're not as low as they are in our youngest learners. In the winter, they're a bit more comparable year over year, with 7th and 8th grade scores actually higher in the winter, which is very encouraging. This next slide looks at this year's progress of our students versus where we want them to be in their college and career readiness levels to ensure that they're on that trajectory to the 1,300 Lexile by the time they graduate. And you'll see that this is where they were in fall again. The very good news here is that even though we only had kids a couple days a week, we can see that at each and every grade level that they have grown. So that's, the gray bar is where we want them to be at the end of the year. And we still have a ways to go, but it's even, just having them in a couple days a week, that we have this growth to me is very encouraging. This is the growth in their Lexile level. But then I looked at how did they grow compared to what they would have grown in previous years. So I took matched sets of data, had thousands and thousands of kids, and looked at average Lexile growth year over year. So blue is last academic year, and the orange is obviously this academic year. You can see that kids grew higher last year. For the most part. The blue bar is higher in virtually every year, except for that in 6th grade, our kids actually grew a wee bit more than they did last year. And in 9th grade, they were the growth was virtually identical. When we look at that growth by modality, blue again are those students enrolled in Aiken Innovate. Orange are those students enrolled in face-to-face or hybrid program. You can see that students pretty much in grades 2 through 8, consistently those enrolled in face-to-face demonstrated higher growth from fall to winter than virtual students. In 9th grade, it was identical growth, regardless of what program you were in. And in 10th grade, our Aiken Innovate students actually on average grew 4 Lexile points more than those in the face-to-face program. When we look at where students entered this fall and where their quantile levels are in winter, the gray bar is where our target is. And again, this is quantile. You can see that obviously our students were a little bit lower, and we've got some ground to make up. But again, growth at every single level we can see, every single grade level. So can you imagine if we were in school a couple days a week, or a couple more days a week, what it would be? But at least we have growth at every single level, very encouraging. I'm gonna skip that one right here. When we look at the same growth, the matched sets again over a 2-year period, we can see that growth from this year is not, is a little bit less, especially at our younger grades. But they level out a little bit more. You can see very little difference at 5th grade. There is some differences in the upper grades, but at 9th grade, they actually had more growth this year than they had last year at this time. So there's some, you know, some highlights there that are encouraging. When we look at finally the quantile growth by modality, we can see again that for pretty much across the board, except for in our higher grades, and it's definitely more, you see more growth at the younger grades than you do higher grades. That's just the nature of learning. But you can see 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, our face-to-face students, 8th had higher growth, and at 9th grade, actually, our AIC and Innovate kids had higher growth on quantile.
Those numbers represent quantile change.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. And that is kind of the end of the achievement data. I wanted to kind of briefly talk about, just to make sure you're aware of some legislative activity that's occurring right now. There's two bills there. House Bill 3592 that was introduced last week before, to remove social studies from tested subjects in grades 3 through 8, to remove the requirement for a student to pass a course in U.S. history to receive a high school diploma, eliminating science in grade 8. It adds some language about parent notifications regarding assessments, you know, giving them a heads up that assessment's coming, sharing results, etc. It requires a requirement to administer the ACT with the writing section to all 11th grade students. In the past, we've had, we've offered students an option to take a test. It's not, hasn't been required. We've encouraged it in Aiken County, but if they've had a choice of SAT versus ACT, this is to require ACT with writing only. I'm assuming this was in preparation. Just 3 days ago, SAT announced that they were no longer going to offer the writing component and none of the subject tests. So I think this was kind of a precursor to that. And that effective 2022-23 school year, that they are required to take content from social studies and to embed it into ELA end of year testing in grades 3 through 8. Then there's a joint resolution that was also introduced on the same date to require end of year assessments. South Carolina Department of Education has submitted a waiver to waive us out of state assessments. And this joint resolution is to require end of year assessments and to require that school report cards be issued next fall, next October 1st, without overall ratings, which is great. I can't see that we can't compare on a system that's been based on comparison and growth, given what we've all experienced the last year, that ratings are going to do any good. But this joint resolution requires state testing and that report cards be issued without the summative kind of rating for schools. Any questions?
That's enough.
Just on this last, I see they're introduced, just clarify, those are State House bills, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And what they're, to put it another term, the end of year assessments they're referring to, like if we go in Power School, that's what we call EOC.
EOC, SC Ready, SC Pass,
Okay.
those are all the end of year assessments, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
That's great.
Thank you again, Ms. Olin. Lot of good information today. I have a couple of questions on just a couple of slides. So I'll jump around, but I'll start here since we're here. And maybe this isn't so much a question as it is commentary. I do have a question. You may not know the answer to this, but I can find it out. Do you know who introduced the bill 3592?
I do, and it's on my desk, but I don't know off the top of my head.
That's okay. It's an interesting mix of bullets, and I'd seen some of that. I mean, it just has across the desk at the house. I don't really feel too good about some of that. I don't mind parts of it, but I don't see why we would remove social studies. This isn't just commentary. I don't see why we would remove social studies or the history requirement when we're trying to build world-class knowledge. That seems regressive to me. But okay, yeah, whatever. I guess we'll cross that bridge. I'll talk to some of my State House folks and get some thoughts there. I'll jump back, actually way back. When you were on the slide, it's page 5 for us. It's the pathway to college and career readiness, where it has all the progressives with the grades and everything. And on the right side, it has the profile of the SC graduate. I had a teacher ask me specifically about benchmarks for the rest of the school year, just in context of everything going on with COVID and, you know, with the It Can Innovate students versus the face-to-face students, and essentially wanted the board to take a hard look at that and whether or not there was some room to ease some of that up or the requirement. I understand the need for it, and I don't know that we need to get to an in-depth conversation about it right now, but she requested that we do that, and I've passed that along to Dr. Bradley. Hopefully we can get that on the next agenda or something. But any thoughts there, just sort of high level with what all's going on the rest of the year? And I know that we've got the chart that shows like the total, each grade, every benchmark, every assessment. I think that would be good to put back out there.
That is posted on the website under my department.
Okay.
Mr. Crane, since you and I spoke, we did add it to the agenda for the next
All right,
meeting.
so we'll be talking about that in some detail. So we just ignore that question.
Okay.
We'll hit some of that on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's important.
And I agree with that as well, but certainly want to be responsive to the inquiry. When we were talking about the KRA overall readiness, which is a few slides past where you are, I don't need you to go to it.
Okay.
But where we dropped, we showed some drops and whatnot with basically kids that are coming in. So that indicates that before they get to us is where the drop theoretically occurred. The question I have, what's our takeaway? What can we do about it? If they're coming in the first 45 days and we're assessing them, and we've seen a significant drop year over year with the amount of students demonstrating readiness. Is there anything we can do about that?
My sense is that this year you did. We saw a significant drop, 34% to less than shy of 20%.
Right.
But that is likely indicative of where everybody was last year.
Just the whole world.
That's right.
So,
kids weren't in daycares. They weren't, in any kind of programs. Parents, if they had older children home, were likely helping them with their schoolwork, et cetera. And I think it's just, everybody was impacted.
Yeah. Well, I'll just more commentary for me. Knowing that that's the case, right? That's across the board. That's not an Aiken issue. That's a global issue, basically. I know that there's been a lot of thoughts within the community about, we can catch the kids up or whatnot, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but certainly moving forward, and maybe this is more directed at Mr. Lawrence, we need to be cognizant of that, because if that's not just the case with kindergartners, that's really everybody to a certain extent. So we just need to be prepared for that.
Well, that's why
we get out of the pandemic, and this is all for that, right? So.
Right, and we're encouraged to see that, you could see our kids are growing.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be growing as fast as we need them to be, but they are growing.
Yeah.
We have our instructional service department is preparing robust summer planning will also help contribute. And now, you know, especially our elementary kids are back in school 4 days a week. I mean, that everything will help contribute to that.
That's right. That's all the questions I've got. I did want to say congratulations with your family news with your son.
Thank you.
With the infantry, so that's you get a lot of
I
people proud
appreciate
out there,
that.
so.
Thank you.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Crane, Representatives Allison and Lucas introduced 3592.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything? I would.
Quickly,
Go ahead.
If you took all this data and rolled it up and could make one assessment, and it may be unfair to, you know, oversimplify it, but would you say that the gap in a normal year in the growth compared to now, is it a Grand Canyon sized gap that's going to take a rocket and under Evel Knievel to get over, or is it a gap that we can, you know, that I can jump over? You know, is it
I would say
great or small?
it depends on level. You can see, I think at our youngest learners, you know, kindergarten, first and second, it's going to take a very concerted effort. I think it's definitely less. You can see it from the numbers, you know, as we get into the middle school and high school. And those students know how to read. They could, you know, help get through their materials. But I would say on K through 2, particularly probably into 3rd, it's going to take a very concerted effort to get those kids. And the whole world is in the same boat.
Yeah. I'm glad I don't have a child at, you know, at that level, because I'd have to give some serious consideration to, should I hold that child back, right? Unless
Yes.
it's 3rd grade all the way over, right? But, you know, thank you.
Well,
You go ahead, Dr. Bradley. I just had a comment. When I get, and this doesn't necessarily apply to everybody, but one thing I remember, you know, that my mom always told me is education's not always a race. So I just want to remind people that for the most part, I think, have some faith, and I think it'll be okay, and try to do the right thing for your kid, though, in what you think it is. But the thing that stands out to me on this, that is not for Ms. Olin, but for us, is the largest discrepancy, at least in the numbers, seems to be the lack of the growth of AI students in that Lexile compared to the folks that were in face-to-face. And, you know, maybe that's why 2,500 and something students are coming back. But we're still having that AI program. So at our level, do we need to change any policies or direction so that we don't continue that? I mean, the kind of repeat the same results so that the gap's even bigger. And that we need to put that somewhere on our agenda.
I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think, first of all, it's extremely important that we get data. And when you resist, there's an innate tendency to resist testing, particularly at times like this. And I think that testing is inherently not bad. It depends on the use for the testing. I don't think anybody's going to do extremely well this year in South Carolina because of COVID. Now, what I think we need to do is to see how we did 3 years ago, 2019-20, when we got top marks on the report card and all that. And then let's see how we did last year and this year, see how much we're losing, see how much underperformance we have. And then we need to study that group by group before we start programming a bunch of new money. I mean, we're getting a lot of money for COVID, and I think we really need to look at programming and what do we need to do to try to rehabilitate the loss that we've incurred, our students have incurred. We talked, Mr. Nessel, about our education being on a continuum, but we've broken it up into chunks, 12 chunks, 13 chunks, so 14 in some cases. And I'm afraid that the assumption, you know, from one level to another may very well be that I start with the objectives that are appropriate to my grade level, not necessarily make a wholesale backup and pick up if I'm a third grade teacher, do I go back and pick up at the beginning? I know they do that on an individual basis as much as they can. The good teachers really do a good job of that. But we're talking about en masse now. We might be needing, in the fourth grade, in some levels, we may be certainly needing to concentrate maybe on a year below, or even a year and a half below, so that we can have a smooth continuum of learning, as opposed to fitting people into objectives, to instructional objectives at a grade level. I may not be articulating that clearly, and I certainly don't mean to offend anybody with those remarks. I know teachers are doing a wonderful job and all that, but we have a reality here that we probably haven't had before. Some teachers have experienced this reality because kids don't learn at a uniform rate, and they've had to go back 2 years in a classroom to pick up where children were actually functioning. And I heard, you almost have in a class have many instructional groups as you have children, because you have to sort of catch everybody where they are and narrow the gaps down as much as you can. I guess what I'm saying is we almost need a task force kind of thing where we really sit down and look at the instructional data, try to assess what's happened to the school district this year, and really look at what we can do to try to catch kids up, understanding that education is not a race. We don't need, I think we're making a lot of mistakes in education now by pushing kids too hard, specifically in kindergarten. The idea of having every kindergarten child trying to read at the end of kindergarten is ridiculous, because maturation, if you know anything at all about physical development, you understand that's not going to happen. But yet our State Department insists that we do that, so I'm told. But anyway, to cut through all the editorialization, I'm just saying that I really think we need to make a real study of this data, and then try to use the data to suggest to us how bad off are we, in what groups, what conditions, what circumstances do we do good, and which ones do we do not so good, and look at what we can do to address those things. Are there deficiencies in our instructional technique, or is it an artifact of something else? What can we address, and get about addressing that as best we can with the resources that we have. I'm just throwing that out there. I'd like for you to consider it. Maybe we can do another one of these in a month or so, when we have a little more data and more time to analyze it, talk about it, think about it. But I do think before we start doing major programming for another year or spending a bunch of money, we ought to at least have a discussion about what our needs are and what can we use some of this funding for in order to rehabilitate where rehabilitation is possible. Anybody else got anything? Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to respond a little bit to Mr. Nessel on virtual. You're exactly right. That is very striking, the difference there. And virtual learning requires a great deal of discipline and a great deal of support. In fact, in our description, we talked about an adult learning partner that every student should have, and most children and adolescents don't have the kind of discipline it takes. And we've said from the beginning it's not for everyone, but that's not the reason that parents chose virtual. They didn't choose virtual because they thought that was the best way for their children to learn. They chose it because they were afraid of the pandemic. So it's and it's being borne out in the data that these students didn't have the discipline and the amount of support. When you're looking at 2 working parents, and you're looking at sometimes three or more children in a home, trying to go in all different directions and different levels. So, and you're right. That's why a lot of them are coming back. I think in post-pandemic, there's still a place for virtual learning, and we're moving in that direction. But it's going to be much smaller. It's going to be families who have the ability to provide that support. It's going to be students who have the discipline and the ability to learn that way, and it's going to be incumbent on us to police that. we can't really police it in this situation, because I can't demand someone who has a fear of the pandemic to come into the school building. But in the future, when that's not an issue, then a student who demonstrates that they're not disciplined enough to do it, then we would revoke that and ask them to come in face to face as normal. But everyone is right about recovery. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources. You know, students are losing as much as, well, you can debate on how face-to-face works with virtual, but of our hybrid students, they're losing up to 3/5 of their face-to-face time with their teachers. And our elementary students are losing 1/5 of their time. So that time needs to be made up. Now, there's not enough time in the year to make up all of it, but as much time and face-to-face and direct instruction that we can give our students, that is going to be, I think, the first step toward that recovery. So as we get to a point where we can spend more face-to-face time, we need to do that as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. And if there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Crane. All in favor, please raise your hand. We stand adjourned.